Chapter 839. So this is the home of the Lee brothers. How extravagant. Lin Yong couldn't help saying as he stood in front of a mansion and looked up. The woman beside him glanced at him and said, "Don't call him that when you go in. This is not the Qi kingdom, and he's no longer the accountant of the Lin family. You have to know your place." "Don't worry, Mississippi. I know that." Lin Yong nodded and walked toward the door. When Fong and Li Yi walked out, he couldn't help saying, "Young master, I think you should apologize to second miss about this. You shouldn't hide such an important thing from her. It's normal for her to be angry with you. Does that mean that sister-in-law Fong already knows about Xiao Hong? That's different. Second miss is not." Fong opened his mouth and shook his head. "Forget it. It's the same. But I still think it's your fault." Li Yi nodded. "I know. It's my fault. I'll talk to her." Lee brothers. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a voice. Generally speaking, people would only address him as young master, master, Lord Li, County Marquis Li, and those who were more familiar with him, like Li Xian, never addressed him as Lee brothers. It had been a long time since he heard them address each other as such. Li Yi raised his head. When he saw the man standing at the door with a surprised face, he was stunned at first, and then his face showed surprise and delight. "Brother Lin, why are you here?" Lin Yong smiled and said, "I came here with Miss to do business, so I came to see you. It's the spring festival, but you're still so tired." He generously gave him a bear hug and asked, "Where's Miss Lin?" Lin Yong turned around and pointed to the back. "Over there. I was just about to send someone in to inform her, and you came out." Gazing outside, Li Yi quickly walked over. That woman smiled at him and extended her hand. "Long time no see." "Long time no see." Li Yi smiled and nodded. Then he looked at her outstretched hand and asked, "This is?" Lin Wanru looked at him in surprise and asked, "A handshake? Isn't that the etiquette here?" "Oh, that's right, that's right." Li Yi came to a sudden realization. He reached out his hand and touched her palm gently. He asked tentatively, "You guys didn't greet everyone like this all the way here, right?" Lin Wanru shook her head. "You're the first." That's good, that's good." Li nodded and said, This handshake is actually a lost etiquette in my hometown. No one uses it anymore. So, if you meet someone in the future, just salute normally." "I got it." Lin Wanru looked at him meaningfully and nodded. Then she looked up at him and asked, "The handshake in your hometown. Do you need to shake for so long?" This depends on how long we've been apart. We haven't seen each other for more than half a year, so we should shake for a longer time." Li naturally let go of her hand and said, "Don't stand outside anymore. Go in quickly." Then he turned around and waved at Fong. "By the way, Fong, go and inform eldest miss that a distinguished guest has arrived." When they walked into the mansion, Li Yi turned his head and asked her, "It's almost the spring festival. Why did you come at this time?" "We're doing business. There's no difference whether we celebrate the spring festival or not." Lin Wanru smiled and said, "The closer it is to the spring festival, the busier I am. In the past, I rarely stayed at home. It's just that I've traveled a little further this year." This was far more than just a little further. If it were a caravan, it would take at least a few months to travel from the Qi kingdom. This round trip would take at least half a year on the road. Rui came out to welcome them. She first bowed to Lin Wanru, then looked at Li Yi and asked, "Husband, this young lady is," Li Yi introduced, "This is Lin Wanru, Miss Lin, whom I've often mentioned to you. When Rui and I were in the Qi kingdom, it was thanks to Miss Lin's care. So this is Miss Lin." Rui held her hand and said, "When husband and Rui were stranded in the Qi kingdom, it was thanks to Miss Lin's care. I've always wanted to thank you. This time, I finally have the chance. Come in. A smile appeared on Lin Wanru's face. Madam Li, you're too polite. Watching them walk in hand, Li looked left and right and asked, where's Rui? During her time in the Qi Kingdom, Mississippi Lu only had Lin Wanru as a friend. He believed that Mississippi Lu would be very happy to see her again. A servant girl said, second miss should be in her room. Go and call her. Li said, then waved his hand and said, forget it, I'll go there myself. He couldn't keep the Cold War with Mississippi Lu. There had to be someone who spoke first. Generally speaking, this person could only be him. From afar, he saw Xiao Huan sitting in the corridor in front of Mississippi Lu's room. Li walked over and asked, is second miss inside? The little servant girl nodded. Li habitually rubbed her head and walked inside. Hey, son-in-law. Xiao Huan immediately called out to him. What's wrong? Li turned around and asked in confusion, is there anything else? The little servant girl rolled her eyes and bit her lips. Then she said with a smile, nothing, son-in-law, please go in. With the lesson from last time, Li first knocked on the door. When he heard the voice, come in, he pushed the door open and walked in. After closing the door and turning around, he was immediately stunned. This time, it wasn't because he saw something he shouldn't have seen. To be exact, he didn't see anything this time. The room was filled with water vapor, blocking his vision. In addition, there was a faint fragrance. A surprised expression appeared on Li's face. This cloud of mist, could it be that she was secretly cultivating in the room? Xiao Huan, help me add some more hot water. When Mississippi Lu's voice came out of the mist, Li finally realized what had happened. He cleared his throat and asked, there's an important guest at home. Do you want to go out and meet him? The voice in the mist paused for a moment before it came again, go out. Li decisively turned around without any hesitation. When he closed the door, he carefully asked, do you still want more hot water? When he walked into the courtyard, he saw the little servant girl still standing there. Before he could speak, Xiao Huan held her stomach and said with a bitter face, son-in-law, my stomach hurts. I'll go back to my room first. Seeing her quickly slip away, Li said in surprise, stomach hurts. It shouldn't be these few days. He looked back at the door of Mississippi Lu's room and decided to stand there and wait for her. Not long after, Mississippi Lu, who had changed into a new set of clothes, walked out from inside. She didn't mention what had happened just now. Instead, she looked at Li and said calmly, she's here. Li was stunned when he heard this. No way, she could even guess this. Seeing Li's expression, her eyes flickered and she asked again, the painting hidden in your study is her, right? Have you known each other for a long time? Ah. When I kidnapped you up the mountain, I was the one who separated you. If it wasn't for me, you and she would have. Sister doesn't care, so I have no reason to object. Mississippi Lu looked at him and said, but, you shouldn't hide this from me. Next time, if you hide it from me like this, I'll ignore you forever. Aw. What aw? She took a deep breath and said, let's go and meet the second wife of the Li residence. What second wife? Li looked at her in surprise and said, Miss Lin has come to the capital. I came to call you and bring you to see her. What are you talking about? Aw. What aw? What did you mean by what you said just now? Mississippi Lu was stunned on the spot. After a moment, she waved her hand and said lightly, nothing, let's go. When walking with her, Li seemed to understand something. He suddenly stopped and looked at her. He promised, don't worry, next time. I won't hide it from you, I swear. Chapter 840. Mississippi Lou turned to look at him. How many more times do you want to do it? Only a few times. Li Yi secretly counted his fingers and then urged, let's go quickly. Don't let Miss Lin and the others wait too long. The friendship between women always came very quickly. By the time he and Mississippi Lou walked over, Lin Wanru and Rui were already calling each other Sister Lou and Sister Lin. After Mississippi Lou went over, there was even less for him to do. He walked over and asked Lin Yong, when did you arrive in the capital? Where are you staying now? Lin Yong replied, we just arrived yesterday and found a random inn to stay in. Li Yi shook his head and said, since you're already in the capital, it's not appropriate to stay in an inn. Which inn are you staying in? I'll ask someone to help you pack your things and move in today. Lin Yong rubbed his hands. That's so embarrassing. Rui and Lin Wanru walked out of the room and said, husband, there are many empty guest rooms at home. During this time, let Sister Lin move in so that she can take care of you. That's what I mean too. Li nodded and walked over. He looked at Lin Wanru and said, Miss Lin, which inn are you staying in? I'll ask someone to help you pack your things. There's no need to go through so much trouble, it's no trouble at all. Didn't we trouble you a lot back then? Okay then. Lin Wanru said a few words and finally nodded in agreement. It would take some time to pack, so they didn't stay at home for long. They asked Fong to call 2 guards from the mansion to help. Li Yi originally planned to go out, so he naturally needed to accompany them when he met them. At the entrance of an inn in the capital, several figures were anxiously pacing. Tell me, where did Miss Lin go at such an important time? The goods are still being held by them. If anything happens to the goods, our trip will be in vain. What should we do now? The officials of the Jing Kingdom are really going too far in their bullying. The few merchants of the Qi Kingdom were anxious. In the past, the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom were enemies as well. However, the Qi Kingdom was very powerful. When they were doing business in the Jing Kingdom, they would not encounter too many obstacles. On the contrary, the Jing Kingdom would deliberately make things convenient for them. However, it was different now. The situation in the Jing Kingdom had reversed in the past 2 years. Their situation had suddenly become very difficult. Hey, Miss Lin is back. Someone shouted. The crowd crowded around her and asked anxiously, Miss Lin, what should we do about this matter? Please give us a definite answer. Although Miss Lin was young, her family's business was very big. Her background was also very strong. She was the leader of the caravan on this trip. Li Yi asked in surprise, what happened? Lin Yong said gloomily, it's all because of those black-hearted people in the treasury. The taxes are 5% and 1%. If we pay the money, our trip will be in vain. The treasury. After listening to Lin Yong's description of the matter, Li Yi waved his hand and said, the imperial court would not normally impose such a heavy tax. It must be the people at the bottom who are deliberately making things difficult for you. After all, you are from the Qi Kingdom. Even if they really make things difficult for you, you have no way to reason with them. The merchants from the Qi Kingdom were speechless. Thinking back to 2 years ago, they had been so proud to be citizens of Qi. Less than 2 years later, they had been reduced to being bullied by a petty official, but this 1% tax is indeed a bit too much. Li Yi knew what was going on. He waved his hand and said, let's go. Let's settle this matter first. Lin Wanru grabbed his sleeve and asked, will it cause you trouble? What's the trouble? Li Yi smiled and said, anyway, there's nothing urgent. Let's go to the Ministry of Revenue and have a cup of tea. Do you want to wait here or come with me? Lin Wanru thought for a moment and nodded. I'll go with you. I'll go too, Lin Yong immediately said. Who is that? Watching the 3 leave, one of the merchants from the Qi kingdom turned his head and asked the person behind him in confusion. I don't know. The accompanying Lin family shopkeeper was also at a loss. He had never heard that Miss knew any important people in the Jing kingdom. But that person just now, why did he look so familiar? The merchants from the Qi kingdom looked in a certain direction at the same time. Their hearts were filled with anxiety and anticipation. Now, they could only place all their hopes on this. On the street, Lin Yong asked in surprise, Li brothers, why are we not going to the official warehouse but to the Ministry of Revenue Yamen? When it comes to collecting taxes, the Ministry of Revenue is still in charge. It will be more effective to find an official from the Ministry of Revenue. Li Yi explained, more importantly, the Ministry of Revenue Yamen is closer. It was also Li Yi's first time coming to the Ministry of Revenue Yamen. After stating his identity, someone immediately went in to pass on the message. The three of them had just entered the courtyard when someone quickly ran out from one of the duty rooms. When that person ran down the steps, he almost tripped. Without even straightening his official robes, he said in a panic, Lord Li. Li Yi patted him on the shoulder and asked, Dr. Han, don't panic. Are Minister Qin and Assistant Minister Zheng here? Dr. Han said in fear and trepidation, the two lords are not in the Yamen at the moment. May I ask what Lord Li needs? Can this lowly official be of service? This was a small matter and Li Yi thought that this Minister of Revenue would be able to handle it as well. Thus, Li Yi briefly explained the matter to him. Don't worry, my lord. This lowly official will immediately send someone. No, this lowly official will personally ask. Seeing that Lord Li was not here to cause trouble, Minister Han immediately relaxed and respectfully spoke. He immediately waved his hand at a lowly official. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and serve Lord Li some tea. There's no need. Li Yi waved his hand and said, I still have matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. Dr. Han, please take care of this matter as soon as possible. Dr. Han immediately bowed. This lowly official will see you off, Lord Li. After walking out of the Ministry of Revenue Yamen, Lin Yong asked in surprise, Li brothers, I feel like that doctor just now was very afraid of you. You must have seen wrongly. Li Yi looked at him and asked, Am I that scary? Lin Wanru glanced at him and didn't say anything. That's true. Lin Yong nodded and asked, Then where are we going now? Li Yi thought about it and said, It will take a while to clean up both sides. Have you eaten yet? Do you want to find a place to eat first? Lin Yong shook his head and said, We haven't eaten anything since morning. Li Yi turned his head and asked, Then let's eat first. What do you think, Miss Lin? Lin Wanru nodded in agreement. Li Yi looked up and pointed to the restaurant in front of them. He said, This is the place. After walking into the restaurant, a waiter quickly came over and looked at them. He said apologetically, Dear guests, I'm sorry, but we are full now. There are no more seats. Would you like to wait for a while? Lin Yong looked at the seats that were all filled and said, Why don't we go somewhere else? Li Yi looked around and happened to meet the gaze of a table beside him. Come, Brother Wu, let me toast you. Wei Junliang had just raised his wine cup and gestured to the young man opposite him when he suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look. Clatter! His hand involuntarily trembled and the wine cup fell to the ground. His face began to pale. I'm done eating. Let's go. He quickly stood up and walked out of the door with his head down. The dishes have just been served. I haven't eaten yet. Several young people showed surprise on their faces. When they looked over, they all stood up and left with Wei Junliang. Oh, what a coincidence. Isn't there a seat now? Lin Yong's face suddenly lit up. He patted the waiter's shoulder and said, Come on, clean up that table. Lin Wanru looked back and then looked at Li Yi in surprise. She asked, You know each other? Among the young people at the table just now, there were indeed a few familiar faces, but she couldn't tell their names. Li nodded and said, I know them, but I'm not familiar with them. There are seats available. Let's go. Chapter 841. On the street, a few young people walked dejectedly. One of them furrowed his brows for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask, Junliang, Louis, what's wrong with you? You haven't even had 2 cups of wine and the dishes have just arrived. Why are you leaving? A young man sighed and said, Chu Ping, don't ask too much. You don't know, in short, just leave. The young man called Chu Ping was slightly anxious and asked, just what happened? Tell me. The young man looked at the person beside him and said, Junliang, you tell me. Chu Ping's gaze also turned to him. Wei Junliang shook his head and said, Chu Ping, you've just returned to the capital and there are some things you don't know. However, let me remind you, if you meet that person in the future, hide as far away as possible. If something really happens, your family won't be able to protect you. Which person? Chu Ping asked in confusion, then said, the person we met in the restaurant just now. Who is he? Li Yi. Wei Junliang patted his shoulder and said, remember this name, His Highness the King of Shu, Duke Qin, Royal Prince Duanyang. In the younger generation of the capital, countless people have suffered at his hands, and it's not just the younger generation. In short, remember my words, do not provoke him. After hearing about that person's deeds from Wei Junliang, Chu Ping's heart was greatly shaken. However, he still curled his lips and pretended to be disdainful. So what? This is the capital, under the feet of the emperor. We didn't provoke him. He acts so arrogantly. Even if His Majesty cares for him and can temporarily protect him, can he stop the mouths of the people of the world? Chu Ping, the way you speak is exactly the same as Grand Tutor Chu. No wonder you were personally taught by him. Wei Junliang said with a smile, I still remember how he lectured us back then, of course. Chu Ping's face revealed an expression of pride. I, Chu Ping, am filled with righteousness. I am worthy of neither the heavens nor the earth. Why would I fear a sycophant? Chu Ping, I know you have awe-inspiring righteousness. Wei Junliang laughed out loud and said, no matter what, I finally had the chance to have a meal with you today, but I ruined my mood. How about this, I will set up a new banquet at the wonderful Sound Pavilion tonight. You must give me face. Immediately, someone laughed and said, you chose the wonderful Sound Pavilion. I'm afraid it's not as simple as just eating, right? Chu Ping said in surprise, wonderful Sound Pavilion. This place sounds like a music hall. Could it be that there are some mysteries here? That person walked to his side and whispered a few words. Chu Ping's expression immediately changed, and he hurriedly said, no, if Grandpa finds out that I went to that kind of place, he'll beat me to death. Alas, this wonderful Sound Pavilion is a place of entertainment. Could it be that the Lord Imperial Tutor is overthinking things? Chu Ping hesitated and asked, are you sure no one will know about this? That person smiled and said, apart from heaven and earth, there is only you and me. A smile appeared on Chu Ping's face as he said, I just want to listen to music and have a meal. I will definitely go. In the restaurant, seeing that Lin Wanru had also put down her chopsticks, Li Yi opened his mouth and said, let's go. The matters over there should be more or less settled. The sloppy old man's toothache hadn't healed yet, so he could only eat porridge for now. Fong ran between the two places every day, so he didn't know how many meals he had to eat. Wait a moment, one last mouthful. Lin Yong hurriedly said as he drank the last mouthful of soup in his cup. Only then did he burp and stand up while rubbing his stomach. Lin Wanru blushed slightly. She secretly glared at him before nodding and standing up. The two chatted as they walked back. Li Yi asked a few things about the Lin family's business. In Feng Province, with the backing of the third prince and the Qian family, the Lin family had once again taken a few steps forward in just half a year. Although it hadn't reached the level of a top wealthy family, it was already a long time ago. For example, the Bai family and the Ma family, which used to be on the same level as the Lin family, could now only become the vassals of the Lin family. Since the price of colored glass had plummeted, they could only rely on the Lin family to barely survive. Lin Wanru looked at the row upon row of streets on both sides of the street, thought for a moment, and said, "If it's just jewelry, it may be the end soon. This time, the main reason I came here is actually to visit the capital of the Jing Kingdom. The ready-made clothes, perfume, liquor, are all very popular in the Qi Kingdom. Unfortunately, I can only bring them in this way, and the price is very high. If I can directly reach an agreement with them and build the workshop in the Qi Kingdom, I can reduce more than 70% of the cost." She paused and said, "However, I heard that these shops all have the shadow of the royal family behind them. I'm afraid it's unlikely." "That's not necessarily true." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Everything is possible." Lin Yong interrupted, "It's not easy to make perfume and liquor, but what's there to cooperate with about clothes? Just make it according to the original." Li Yi glanced at him. If he were to do business in the future for another 1,000 years, he would definitely lose so much that even his underwear would not be left. However, for now, what he said was not wrong at all. Regardless of whether it was underwear or ready-made clothes, he wanted to first build up his reputation and reputation. This way, even if there were imitators in the future, they would not be too much of a threat. Lin Wanru also glanced at him, but did not say anything. If things were really that simple, ready-made clothes shops in the Qi Kingdom would have sprung up a long time ago. In fact, although there were countless people imitating the Jing Kingdom, the quality of the fabric and the style of the clothes were far from being comparable to the authentic products in the Jing Kingdom. Those shops sprung up like mushrooms after a spring rain, only to close down in a short period of time. Although Li Yi did not say anything, Lin Wanru's words reminded him that if he were to cooperate with the Lin family, his own shop would soon be able to open in the Qi Kingdom. Although the Jing Kingdom was huge, there would always be a time when business would be saturated. The Qi Kingdom, this was a piece of land that had not been cultivated yet, and it was exceptionally fertile. It was just waiting for him and Miss Lin to sow the seeds. Thinking of this, Li Yi tilted his head and asked, "Seriously, does the Lin family really intend to intervene in these businesses?" Lin Wanru nodded and said, "This is also one of the important reasons why I came to the capital this time." "Can you handle it?" "It shouldn't be a problem to hire more people." Fong looked at the two figures walking side by side in front of him and rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Li brothers." Lin Yong thought of something and was about to step forward when someone pressed down on his shoulder. "Where are you going?" Fong asked in a low voice. "I have a question for the Li brothers." "What question?" Fong put his arm around his shoulder and said, "This brother is called Lin Yong, right? The son-in-law is very busy now, don't disturb him. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I'm really sorry, this is all our negligence, and we've caused you trouble." At the entrance of the restaurant, Dr. Han said apologetically to the people opposite him, "Don't worry, we will definitely deal with this matter seriously. We will not tolerate those who are biased." We don't dare. A merchant from the Qi Kingdom looked at this official from the Jing Kingdom, and his face turned pale with fright. At a glance, he could tell that this official's status was much higher than the officials they had met along the way. He was actually speaking to them in such a polite manner. It really made them feel weak. From afar, he saw Lin Wanru walking over in front of him. Only then did he take a few quick steps forward and hurriedly say, "Miss Lin, this." Before Lin Wanru could react to what had happened, Li Yi had already walked over and said, "This kind of matter can be handled by anyone." "Why did Dr. Han come personally?" Dr. Han hurriedly said, "Lord Li, to tell you the truth, this lowly official is in charge of the official treasury. These days, the Ministry of Revenue has been busy and had no time to attend to other matters. I didn't think that these bastards would be so bold. Don't worry, Lord Li, this lowly official will definitely investigate this matter to the end. He then raised his head and said tentatively, this lowly official has already sent out all the goods, not a single one missing. I wonder if Lord Li, didn't you collect taxes? Afraid that he would anger this Lord Li, Dr. Han immediately shook his head. No, not a single coin was collected. How can this be? Li Yi shook his head. This tax was for the country, and for the country, it was for Emingsu, and for Emingsu, it was, in short, as a law-abiding citizen, he couldn't be given special treatment. Everything was done according to the law. Seeing Lord Li shake his head, Dr. Han's body trembled. Li patted his shoulder and said, the taxes that should be collected still have to be collected. Otherwise, how can the country's laws be respected? Dr. Han, you must be fair, you can't be biased. Hearing this, Dr. Han's face turned bitter, and his voice sounded like he was about to cry. He nodded repeatedly. Lord Li is right. This lowly official will collect them immediately. Chapter 842. In the Jing Kingdom, the merchants from the Qi Kingdom and those from the Jing Kingdom were naturally treated differently. It was normal for the merchants to be taxed twice as much. In fact, in the Qi Kingdom, the laws were even stricter when it came to merchants from other countries. However, even so, it was enough for the merchants of the Qi state to thank this young man from the Jing state endlessly. If it wasn't for him, they would have wasted more than half a year on this trip. Some of them would have even lost their entire family's wealth. At the same time, he secretly rejoiced in his heart. He rejoiced that he was following Miss Lin and not someone else. Thinking of the doctor's attitude just now, who would have thought that the Lin family was not only all-powerful in the kingdom of Qi, but also in the distant capital of the Jing kingdom. Lin Wanru and Lin Yong went up to tidy up the room and left the rest to the guards from the Li family. As for the shopkeepers and waiters from the Lin family, they stayed in the inn temporarily to deal with the goods brought from the Qi kingdom. With nothing to do, Li Yi turned to look at them and said, it's still early. Why don't I show you around the capital? Lin Wanru nodded without any hesitation and said, I knew that the capital is prosperous. Even the capital of the Qi kingdom can't compare. Now that we're fated to meet, of course we have to take a good look. Sorry to trouble you. No need to stand on ceremony with us. Li Yi waved his hand and said, then let's go now. It's time to go back after walking around for more than 2 hours. The capital was the capital not only because it was the outskirts of the emperor, where the imperial city was located, and the center of power in the Jing kingdom, but also because of its extremely prosperous commerce. For Lin Wanru and Lin Yong, there were too many things here that they couldn't see in the Qi kingdom. For example, in the shops that sold women's personal items, there would occasionally be the figures of men. In such an environment, these people could still maintain a straight face, and from time to time, they would gossip with their female companions. Lin Yong watched as Li Yi walked in, and the man surnamed Fong followed him without any change in expression. Lin Yong then walked into the shop with relief. But soon after, he was dazzled by all kinds of colorful little objects that he had never seen before. He lowered his head, not daring to look again, and hurriedly retreated. Li Yi turned around and glanced at him. He wasn't surprised by Lin Yong's actions. In fact, even the majority of men in the capital city did not have the courage to step into a lingerie shop. Of course, in the past year, there had also been some people with avant-garde ideas and artistic hearts who wanted to use their discerning eyes to personally pick 1 or 2 pieces of clothing for their female companions. At this time, Lin Wanru was just a simple businesswoman. At the beginning, when Li Yi followed beside her and accompanied her to look at these women's lingerie, her face blushed for a moment, but it soon became natural. When she stopped beside a shelf, Li Yi asked, "How is it?" Lin Wanru was surprised and asked, "What do you mean how is it?" How I feel about this place. She was stunned for a moment, then looked around and said, be it the fabric or the weavers, they are all very high quality. Although there are many styles, each one is extremely beautiful. You can see that the designer of these things have put in a lot of effort. It's not surprising that they are popular and sought after by women all over the world. No wonder, although there are so many people trying to imitate them, few succeed. Unless we reach an agreement with them, it will be very difficult to imitate them. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, let's go. Li nodded and then turned to look at a young girl behind them. He pointed to a few pieces of clothing that Lin Wanru's gaze had lingered on for a long time and ordered, wrap these up for this girl. Lin Wanru was stunned for a moment, then shook her head and said, no need, I'll just look. Li waved his hand and said, you're welcome. Speaking of which, I haven't officially given you anything yet. Since you're in the capital city, I have to do my part as a host. Don't refuse. Lin Wanru looked at him and said in surprise, is it also the custom of your hometown to give a girl these for the first time? This is not the point. Li shook his head and said, in the past, when we were in the Qi kingdom, it was always you who gave us things. This time, don't be polite with me. Miss, it's done. The young girl smiled and handed over a cloth bag embroidered with a few willow leaves. Only then did Lin Wanru notice that in the shop, many women were carrying such bags in their hands. The material of this handbag was excellent, and it also looked good. No wonder the underwear here was so expensive. Just from the handbags they gave, it could be seen. Li smiled at the young girl, then turned back and said, let's go out and look at the other things. You haven't paid yet. Although Li had said that this was a gift for her, Lin Wanru still took out her purse and was about to ask the young girl for the price. Li, who was beside her, waved his hand lightly and said, it's our own shop, no need to be polite. Ah! The purse in Lin Wanru's hand almost fell to the ground. She looked at him in a daze and murmured, this shop, is it your family's? Ever since Lin Yong found out that the shop that sold women's underwear belonged to the Li brothers, he always had an illusion when he looked at him. It was as if there was a halo above his head. Women's underwear, bras, and other things were flying around the halo. Lin Wanru walked on the street and finally recovered from the shock of what had just happened. She said, there's a tailor shop here. A moment later, she saw the young girl in the shop handing her a familiar handbag and the willow leaf on it. She turned to look at Li and murmured, this. Li looked at her and nodded. You're welcome. Lin Wanru finally understood this time. As long as there was a willow leaf logo, there was no need to be polite. After walking halfway down the street, she discovered that not only the underwear shops, but also the cloth shops, perfume shops, soap shops, wine shops, confectionery shops, and even the Ru family inn, where they had stayed yesterday, were also free to use. This even gave her the illusion that she didn't need to be polite when buying things in the entire capital. The Lin family had been merchants for generations and had been illustrious and glorious. She had seen many rich and powerful merchants, but even those people couldn't compare to the scene she saw with her own eyes today. Miss, we've been walking for a long time. Should we find a place to rest? Lin Yong looked around and her eyes suddenly lit up. There's a brothel in front. Why don't we go inside and listen to a show? I heard that the shows in the Jing Kingdom's brothel are very exciting. Lin Wanru's mind was a bit confused at this moment. She wanted to find a place to properly sort out her thoughts. Moreover, Lin Yong's body was already full of things. Finding a place to rest would be good. She turned to look at Li Yi to ask for his opinion. Seeing Li Yi nod, she said, that's fine. I've only heard about the Jing Kingdom's brothel. Today is a good opportunity to see it. After walking into the brothel, her footsteps paused. She seemed to have thought of something. She retreated outside and looked up. There was a beautiful willow leaf logo on top of her head. It was particularly eye-catching. Go in. Whatever show you want to listen to. Li Yi walked over from behind and said, You're welcome. Chapter 843. This is such a big place, and it's all ours. Lin Yong was still not used to the feeling of renting out a theater. He looked down at the stage below, then looked left and right, and saw that there were no other customers besides them. There were all sorts of fruits and pastries on the table in front of them. He asked with uncertainty. Fong patted his shoulder, took a pear from the table, and took a bite. He said, Don't look, no one else will come in. Li Yi had no intention of renting out the theater, but the scene that Lin Wanru had casually ordered was not scheduled today, so it could only be performed at the last minute. Li Yi did not tell her either. After all, it was his family's brothel, and it was not a big deal to be a little extravagant once in a while. Lin Wanru took a sip of tea and looked down at the stage, but her mind was not there. She had known many things about him a long time ago. He was the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom, and a favorite minister of the emperor. Before he had even reached the age of 20, he had risen from a commoner to a noble, and his glory was unparalleled. If not for the experience in the Qi kingdom half a year ago, given their status and position, perhaps they would never have met, and the things that had happened before would not have happened. Originally, she had thought that the distance between her and the accountant, who was proficient in mathematics and had a unique understanding of business, was very close. However, the appearance of the third prince later made her understand that there was an insurmountable gap between the two of them. After arriving at the capital, in less than a day's time, she had already heard many things about him. He was more powerful than she had imagined, and it also made her realize that things were not the same as they had been half a year ago. One was a foreign businessman, and the other was the youngest duke in the Jing kingdom. Perhaps even if they met, there would not be much to say between them. However, this thought was completely overturned when she saw him. Everything seemed to be the same as half a year ago. At this moment, after learning about these things, she was surprised to feel that the distance between the two of them seemed to be much closer than before. It was as if they suddenly had a common language, just like half a year ago. Li Yi turned to look at Lin Wanru and asked, You just said that the Lin family wants to get involved in industries other than jewelry. Is it true? Lin Wanru nodded and said, I started preparing a few months ago. This time, I came to the Jing kingdom to see more and learn more. I thought it would be best if I could cooperate with you on perfume and ready-made clothes, but I didn't expect. She looked at Li Yi and shook her head. I didn't expect such a coincidence. Actually, a few days ago, I also thought that the business in the Jing kingdom would eventually reach saturation. I also had the idea of expanding these businesses to the Qi kingdom. But after all, it's a neighboring country, and the relationship between the two countries is so tense. If the merchants from the Jing kingdom were to go there, I'm afraid that they would encounter a lot of trouble and obstacles. He looked at Lin Wanru, wanting to say something but hesitated. How about, the two of them spoke almost at the same time and were stunned at the same time. When they looked at each other, they understood each other's thoughts. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you. Li Yi smiled and reached out his hand. Lin Wanru also reached out and shook his hand without hesitation. From now on, we're a family, so soon. Fong opened his eyes wide and looked at this scene in disbelief. The two figures who had just walked into the door of the private room stopped. Wan Ruoqing looked puzzled. Xing Zumo's eyes stopped on the two for a moment and she asked in a low voice, Did I disturb you? Li Yi and Lin Wanru looked back and were slightly stunned. Then, they naturally let go of their hands. He shook his head and said with a sincere expression, No, of course not. Lin Wanru looked at him, then looked at the two girls in front of her, and asked, These two girls? Li Yi stood up and introduced the two women to her before saying, This is Lin Wanru, Miss Lin. The three women nodded slightly. Xing Zumo looked at them and said, We're just here to take a look. We won't disturb you. Her gaze swept across Li Yi's body, then she left with a smile. Sorry, I'll leave you for a moment. Li Yi naturally saw the deep meaning in her eyes. He smiled apologetically at Lin Wanru and immediately followed her out. Lin Wanru looked at the figure disappearing at the door and a thoughtful expression appeared on her face. Fong stood to the side and shook his head slightly when he saw the confusion and thought on her face. Somewhere in the brothel, in a room on the second floor, seeing Li Yi walk in, Ruoqing quietly left and gently closed the door. The Luo Shui goddess was flipping through a picture book. Li Yi explained, "This is Miss Lin, you don't need to explain anything." Xing Zumo rolled her eyes and said, "It has nothing to do with me anyway." Li Yi sat beside her and said, "How can it have nothing to do with you? If it weren't for Miss Lin, you wouldn't have seen me a long time ago." Ha! Confusion and worry immediately appeared on her face. Why? What happened? Li Yi briefly told her what happened in the Qi Kingdom. If it weren't for her, he and Mississippi Lu would be in a much more dangerous situation. What about the family you mentioned just now? Miss Lin's family is in business. This time, I plan to sell perfume and ready-made clothes to the Qi Kingdom, so I can only cooperate with Miss Lin. In the future, the two families will benefit each other. If we aren't family, what are we? Then why are you holding hands? It's a kind of etiquette to show that the cooperation has been achieved. Besides, Fong is still here. How can it be like that? Xing Zumo glanced at him and said, "Then why didn't you tell me earlier? You didn't give me a chance just now." Li Yi looked at her and asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Jealous?" She rolled her eyes again. "Who's jealous? Don't worry. My relationship with Miss Lin is still very pure. It's not like what you think." Li Yi put his arm around her shoulder and said, "But, I quite like it when you're jealous, I'm not." Her face was a little red. Then, as if remembering something, she hurriedly stood up and said, "Oh no, she's your savior. Was I a little impolite just now? So you know that you were impolite. I thought you. Oh, anyway, it's all your fault." She glared at Li Yi and then quickly ran out. Li Yi shook his head. At this moment, she must have gone to cultivate her relationship with Miss Lin. It was not very suitable for him to appear. His business was developing towards the Qi Kingdom, and the Lin family was undoubtedly the best partner. However, the specific cooperation method still needed to be discussed slowly. At least for now, the two of them had reached an agreement. There was still a long way to go. She still had to stay in the capital for a long time, so there was enough time to discuss. There was a pen and paper on the table in the room. Since he had nothing to do, he walked over and sat down, ready to write down some preliminary ideas. This was Ruoqing's room. The room was clean and tidy. There was a thick pile of books on the table, most of which were scripts. On one of the open pages, there were her comments. The pleasing hairpin-style small regular script was just like her. At first glance, it gave people a feeling of delicacy and elegance. The ink was still wet, so he couldn't close the book directly. There was no extra space on the table. Li Yi looked around but couldn't find any space. He had to open the drawer next to the table and put the open book in it horizontally. The size was just right. When he closed the drawer, his hand paused, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. Then, he took out the book again. In addition to the book he took out, there was only a thick booklet in the drawer, and some yellowed paper under the booklet. Li Yi subconsciously reached out his hand, but stopped in mid-air. Since she put it in the drawer alone, it might be something very secretive or important. He just touched other people's things without their permission. It seemed, maybe, not so good. Chapter 844. Li Yi thought about it and decided to close the drawer. If this was Zue Mo's, with their current relationship, he might really open it secretly to see if she had scolded him in the diary or if she had any little secrets. But Ruoqing was different. She was so beautiful that he couldn't bear to do anything sinful. The moment he closed the drawer, his eyes inadvertently swept over the yellowed paper at the bottom, and his hands paused again. The paper was a little old and wrinkled, and he could vaguely see some lines and handwriting on it. It was very familiar. Li hesitated for a moment, took out the thick book with a blank cover, put it on the table, and carefully took out the paper below. The doubt on his face deepened, because the familiar feeling also deepened. The paper was very old. He opened it carefully, and the lines and handwriting were clearer. The first thing he saw was a poem written on it. To be exact, it was a word. Delicate clouds play tricks, flying stars spread hatred, the silver river crosses in the dark. It was, Immortal Magpie Bridge. When he completely unfolded the paper, the lines gradually took shape. It was a woman in a palace dress, with colorful ribbons flying behind her. Opposite the woman was a man in coarse clothes. In the middle was the Milky Way outlined by a few strokes, and under the feet of the two were countless birds drawn by 2 strokes. It was a meeting on the Magpie Bridge drawn by simple strokes. The words were very ugly, and the simple strokes seemed extremely childish to him now, but the words were written by him, and the painting was also drawn by him. This was the sky lamp that he and his little maid had personally released on the double 7th day of the first year of Jinghe. Later, the sky lamp was picked up by Wan Ruoqing, and this, Immortal Magpie Bridge, also spread out. The interaction between him and Wan Ruoqing probably began from this sky lamp. It was just that he didn't expect that this thing, which Li Yi himself had long forgotten, would be brought to the capital city by her and kept until now. Li Yi stared at the lines on the paper in a daze for a long time before he folded it again and put it back in its original state. He picked up the book again. When he was about to put it back, he opened it and took a look. It was the first day of the 7th month in the first year of Jinghe. After flipping another page, it was already the 7th of July, and then the 13th of July. This was obviously a diary, and it was not the kind that was recorded every day. As for why it started in July, it might be because she had just finished her previous diary, or maybe she had just developed the habit of writing a diary at that time. This was not important. What was important was that this was her diary. Li Yi only glanced at it and didn't look at it again. He closed it and carefully put it back. If it was some other kind of book, it wouldn't be a big deal to look at it. However, it was somewhat immoral to read someone else's diary after knowing it was someone else's. The few articles that she had accidentally glanced through were nothing more than things that happened in the brothel, or a talented man or woman who had written a good poem at a poetry meet, and she copied it down. There was also a prayer lantern that fell from the sky at a certain poetry meet, and it happened to land at her feet with a good poem written on it, and something like that. The diary was a very private thing. If there was a woman's worries written in it, it would be inappropriate for him to peek at it again. However, what worries could Ruoqing have? Just thinking about it made his heart itch. Should I look at it again, just one look? His hand pressed on the diary, and his heart was hesitant. Just when Li Yi's mind was a little confused, there were footsteps coming from the door again. Wan Ruoqing gently pushed the door open, and there was a trace of panic on her pretty face. When she saw Li Yi sitting in front of the table and writing something, she finally felt relieved. Li Yi turned around and glanced at her. He pointed to a book on the table. The page that you just read, I helped you fold it. Next time, just find the page with the corner. Wan Ruoqing came over and nodded. It is a script written by someone. Old Sun thought it was good, so he brought it to me yesterday for me to review. Her eyes inadvertently glanced at the drawer next to the table, and then quickly moved away. Li Yi pretended not to notice her gaze. He pointed to the bedside and gestured for her to sit down. Then he said, "How many states are there now that we haven't explored?" "There are 5. Wan Ruoqing did not think too much and gave the answer. These 5 states are all barren lands. We have sent people there before, but in the end, they did not succeed. It doesn't matter. In that case, we can just abandon these 5 places. Li Yi shook his head and said, "What do you think, if we go to the Qi kingdom?" Wan Ruoqing said in surprise, "You mean, bring our brothel to the Qi kingdom?" Li Yi nodded. Wan Ruoqing frowned slightly. She thought for a moment and said, "The Qi kingdom is different from the Jing kingdom. If our people go there, they will definitely encounter unimaginable obstacles. It's fine if it's just for show, but if it's for gathering information." When it came to the brothel, she became serious. She seriously analyzed the pros and cons of developing the brothel in the Qi kingdom, and how they should go about it if they really had the idea. Li Yi listened to her while thinking about other things. Since she entered the room, she had glanced at the table 3 times, intentionally or not. Each time, her eyes would sweep over the drawer, which meant that there was something important inside. It made her, who had always been steady, panic. Li Yi looked at the blank diary on the bookshelf in his mind. After a long time, he let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, his mind moved. The book slowly turned to a page. 2 pages. Countless pages. The 7th day of the 7th month in the 1st year of Jing He. Poems can fall from the sky. I wonder who Li, the one who wrote, "If love lasts for a long time, how can we stay together day and night," is, the 15th day of the 8th month in the 1st year of Jing He. May we live together for a long time. So he is Li Yi. I should have thought of it. Jing He, he's actually our neighbor. But he's so talented. Why does he act like a businessman? Oh no. He offended so many people tonight. Will it affect his career? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have gone tonight, he's injured. I don't know if it's serious or not. Thanks to him today, elder son and the others don't have to leave. The sisters also have food to eat. It seems that we owe him too much. His wife is so beautiful. She's a good match for him. Is he going to the capital? When will he come back? He's finally back. He wrote so many poems for Zuemo. Even Zuemo herself was shocked. Zuemo, so Zuemo is also. The capital is really big. Can the brothel really open all over the capital and all over the Jing kingdom in the future? Zuemo is also here. That's great. She should be very lonely in Qing and prefecture. I wonder if he will come today. He should be very happy to see Zuemo. The expression on Li Yi's face changed. Sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes annoyed, and sometimes worried. The reason why he didn't like to put the handwritten books into his mind was that when he received the information, he could clearly feel the emotions of the writer at that time. There was no real empathy in the world, but for Li Yi, there was. Although he had never experienced anything like this before, the emotions that were revealed between the lines would be experienced by him in the process. When reading engraved books, such a situation would not occur at all. Therefore, he almost completely experienced the emotional journey of Wan Ruoqing in the past 2 years. Of course, he also experienced the emotions hidden between the lines. You. What's wrong with you? Wan Ruoqing looked at him in a daze. Seeing the change of expression on his face, she asked nervously, "Did I say something wrong?" No. Li Yi closed his eyes. After opening them again, he shook his head and said, "I thought of something myself." The feelings of a young girl were always poems, but the process of writing poems was very difficult to bear. The feeling of having 2 kinds of emotions mixed together was not a good feeling. If he were to read page by page and experience all these emotions again, it would be as if he had experienced a new life. He might even have a split personality. With another thought, the book in his mind turned into spots of light and completely dissipated. At the same time, countless pieces of information surged into his mind. He looked at Wan Ruoqing. Just as he was about to speak, his body suddenly shook. His heart seemed to be clenched tightly with a fist and filled with some kind of emotion. He clutched his chest and gasped for breath. His body trembled and tears rolled down his cheeks uncontrollably. Chapter 845. He came again today. There was no more osmanthus cake. He seemed to be a little disappointed. This autumn, he should dry more. Drunken Mo, this silly girl, can't hide anything in her heart. She obviously likes him. He should have seen it, right? He was taken away. What should I do? What should I do? There's finally news from the brothel. It's good that he's fine. It's been a month. I wonder how he's doing outside. Those people didn't make things difficult for him, did they? 2 months, 4 months, God bless, he's finally back. Drunken Mo is also very happy. Seeing her hiding in the room and crying, if it can continue like this, it's really good. This year's osmanthus is very good. He will definitely like it. Drunken Mo, they. It's good that Drunken Mo can have a good home. Li Yi sat there in a daze. Images kept appearing in his mind, and his emotions were no longer under his control. These emotions were what Wan Ruoqing had once felt, and they were also what he was feeling at this moment. Although he had not experienced it personally, for some reason, these emotions and feelings were so real and clear, filling his heart. Joy, grievance, happiness, sadness. All kinds of things were intertwined. In the willow alley, the person standing behind the door and watching the 2 people in the courtyard talking and laughing was her. Outside the brothel, the figure standing at the entrance of the alley and looking into the distance was also her. In front of the window of the small building, watching a figure disappear, she sat there for a long time until night fell. It was still her. She still smiled at him and spoke softly, exactly the same as before. But no one knew the pain in her heart. Wan Ruoqing looked at him clutching his chest and crying uncontrollably. Her beautiful face had already turned pale. She said anxiously, "What's wrong with you? Is your chest uncomfortable? I'll call the doctor right away." The moment she turned around, Li Yi reached out to grab her wrist and said in a low voice, "I'm fine, don't worry." He had only personally experienced some of the things in her heart. She could even stand here and talk to him without the slightest bit of awkwardness. What could possibly happen to him? Wan Ruoqing's face was still pale. She looked at him and said worriedly, "Then you." "It's okay. My chest suddenly hurt a little, but it's much better now." Li Yi shook his head and said, "I'm a little thirsty, I'll go get some water." Wan Ruoqing hurriedly got up. There was a glass container and a cup in the corner of the room. Although it was what she usually used, she couldn't care so much at this moment. After pouring a cup of water for him, she quickly walked over. Li Yi picked up the glass of water and drained it in one gulp. Only then did he calm down a little. Wan Ruoqing was still worried. She looked at him and whispered, "Is there really nothing wrong?" Li Yi smiled and stood up. He patted his chest and said, "I'm really fine. Let's go out. They should be done soon." Wan Ruoqing shook her head and said, "You rest here for a while. I'll go find a doctor. I'm really fine." Li Yi shook his head and said, "When you enter the palace tomorrow, just find a doctor." Wan Ruoqing looked at him a few more times. Seeing that he was really fine, she nodded and said, "You must remember tomorrow, the play is almost over. Let's go." She turned around and prepared to open the door. "Ruoqing." A voice came from behind her. She turned her head and looked at him in confusion. He used to call her Miss Wan or Miss Ruoqing. After they got to know each other, he didn't call her that. In his memory, he had never formally called her that. Li Yi slowly walked over. He looked at her and said in a low voice, "Can I hug you?" She was startled and didn't believe her ears. She raised her head to look at him. Li Yi opened his arms and took a deep breath. Just for a moment. She looked at the smile on his face and her heartbeat sped up. She clasped her hands together and didn't know what to do. After hesitating for a long time and seeing that he still didn't put his hands down, she slowly opened her arms. Li Yi embraced her and put his hands around her waist. He slowly closed his eyes. Wan Ruoqing opened her eyes. Her heart was beating very fast. She didn't know where to put her hands. After a long time, she finally dared to hold him gently. She carefully looked up and closed her eyes as well. No one knew how long it would be for a moment. It could be as short as the blink of an eye or as long as the world. Li Yi didn't know either. "They're coming." After a long time, Wan Ruoqing finally spoke softly. Li Yi let go of his hands and said, "Let's go down as well." As for this hug, they tacitly didn't mention it. When he walked out of the building, Xing Zumo and Lin Wanru also walked over from the opposite side. Goddess Luo Shui glanced at him and asked in surprise, "What happened to your eyes?" Li Yi rubbed his eyes and said, "Nothing. Sand accidentally got in my eyes." "Are you done now? Let me help you blow it." She walked over worriedly and stood in front of him. Just as she stood on her tiptoes, she seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly moved away with a red face. She whispered, "Is there anything else?" Lin Yong strode over and said, "Men and women shouldn't touch each other. It's not convenient for this lady. Li brothers, do you want me to blow them for you?" "What are you blowing for?" Fong grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "There's sand in my eyes too. Help me blow them." Li Yi looked at her and shook his head gently. "It's fine now." Xing Zumo nodded and then turned to Lin Wanru. "The other places in the brothel are also quite interesting. Let me show you, okay?" "Thank you, Miss Zhang." Lin Wanru nodded happily. After visiting the brothel and saying goodbye to Xing Zumo and Ruoqing, it was getting late. Chapter 846. Second Miss, it was all my fault that day. Please don't blame the son-in-law anymore. Xiao Huan walked over with tears in her eyes. She hugged Mississippi Lu's arm and shook it as she spoke pitifully. This was the first time she took the initiative to approach Mississippi Lu in the past 2 days. Mississippi Lu looked back and asked, "How did I blame him?" "I saw it. The son-in-law cried because of you." The servant girl wiped her tears and said, "Second Miss, if you want to blame someone, blame me. You can beat me or scold me. I've never seen the son-in-law cry before." Mississippi Lu looked back again. There was some hesitation on her pretty face. It was just a small gift. Did he have to be moved to tears? As she thought of this, she suddenly realized that she had never given him anything decent. It seemed like she hadn't even given him anything that was not decent. She looked at Xiao Huan and suddenly asked, "Do I treat him badly?" The servant girl nodded. Mississippi Lu frowned slightly. She quickly shook her head. Mississippi Lu's brows relaxed slightly. "It's not very bad. It's very, very bad. In another 2 days, it would be the 4th year of Jing He. This year's New Year's Eve would be very lively. Old mistress had already said that they would spend the New Year's Eve here. This was naturally for the sake of the young master of the Li family. In addition, because Lin Wanru had helped him and Mississippi Lu, Rui now regarded her as half a family member. Naturally, she would participate in the reunion dinner that night. Together with the Duan Wu family, this year's New Year's Eve was naturally different from the previous family of 4. Li Yi lay in the courtyard and basked in the sun. After 2 days, his mood was not affected. He began to read the contents of the notebook word by word. Mississippi Lou walked out of the room. She raised her hand and something flew over. After Lee caught it, he was slightly stunned. It was an apple, and it was peeled. He didn't quite understand what Mississippi Lou meant. She gave him a peeled apple. Did she mean to peel him? It seemed that other than hiding that matter from her and accidentally barging into her room when she was bathing, he had not offended her in any way, right? Mississippi Lou glanced at him and said faintly, "An apple a day is good for your health." Lee stood up from the rocking chair and looked at her warily. "What's the matter? Just say it." Mississippi Lou frowned and looked at him. "What do you mean? Are you all right?" Lee looked at her suspiciously. "Is this apple poisonous, or did you smear laxatives on it? Forget it if you don't want to eat." Second Miss Lou snatched the apple from his hand and took a bite. Then, she turned around and left without looking back. Those who were unaccountably solicitous were hiding evil intentions. Especially Mississippi Lou. She actually peeled an apple for him personally. He would never believe that she had no ulterior motives. Fortunately, he had already seen through everything. Lee pursed his lips, then looked up and murmured, "It should be about time. Somewhere in the capital city." "Miss, the script that we took yesterday, I've already looked through it. The parts that need to be changed have all been marked out. After the changes are made, just bring it to Old Master Sunday, miss. They want us to arrange more chivalrous and chivalrous plays. Go and tell them that it's already being arranged. Old Master Wu from the north of the city accidentally fell off the stage yesterday and was slightly injured. Old Master Wu has a lot of prestige in the capital city. Go and see for yourself. Remember to get some money from the accountant, don't go empty-handed." When Wan Ruoqing walked out of the brothel, it was noon. In fact, she had formed the habit of eating at this time. She habitually glanced in a certain direction, and when she saw a figure walking over, she was slightly stunned. What a coincidence. Lee looked at her and said with a smile, "I went to a few shops in the morning. When I passed by the porridge shop, I bought some porridge and vegetables. Have you eaten? Do you want to eat together?" Not yet. It was just a habitual action. She never thought that he would really appear from there. After Wan Ruoqing came back to her senses, she nodded slightly. Lee nodded and said, "That's just right. Let's go up and eat together. When I bought it just now, I accidentally bought too much, in the attic on the second floor of the small building." Wan Ruoqing looked at the porridge on the table and asked in confusion, "Why did you buy so much?" Li was stunned for a moment. Then he looked back at Fong and said, "I bought a portion for him, but I didn't know that he had already eaten. It's too much for one person to eat." Fong nodded and rubbed his hungry stomach. He nodded and said, "Yes, when I came here just now, I had already eaten. Tremolo lotus seed and 8 treasures porridge, which one do you want?" Li picked up a small bowl and said, "The business of this porridge shop is good, and the taste is good. Tremolo lotus seed." Wan Ruoqing nodded and said, "Yes, I remember when I was a child, there was such a porridge shop not far from my home. But at that time, I could only eat it once a month. The taste of this shop is similar to that of my childhood." Actually, she was used to going there to buy some porridge and vegetables in the afternoon. She had planned to do the same today. She didn't expect that there would be such a coincidence. Coincidentally, even those few side dishes were her favorite. That's a coincidence. Li handed her chopsticks and said, "Let's eat. I have a few ideas about the future development of the brothel. I want to discuss with you." Smelling the fragrance of porridge, Fong swallowed a mouthful of saliva, gently closed the door, and went out. Originally, he only planned to eat 2 chicken legs, but now he wanted to eat 4. When he bought the porridge shop, he wanted to taste it. Was the tremolo lotus seed porridge really so delicious? I really didn't expect that Lord Tseng is already the governor of the capital, but his life is still so frugal. You can eat plain porridge and pickled vegetables with such relish. I really admire you. Tsing Shichen, who had moved into the governor's mansion, looked up and casually stretched out his hand, saying, I'm used to living a luxurious life. Occasionally eating plain porridge and pickled vegetables is also a special flavor. You can sit anywhere you want. After a few words of greeting, Tsing Shichen put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth, and asked, Brother Chui, you came in person today. Did something big happen? Chui Qingming smiled and said, Can't I come here to sit if there is nothing important? Tsing Shichen only smiled and didn't reply, because he knew that this second in command of the Chui family wouldn't come here so easily if there was nothing important. As expected, Chui Qingming said, Lord Tseng was once taught by Grandmaster Chu, so you must understand him very well. What do you think we should do to obtain Grandmaster Chu's full support? Tsing Shichen raised his brows, then said calmly, To be honest, if it's Grandmaster Chu, I think it's better to stay put. Rashly roping him in would have the opposite effect. Why? Chui Qingming asked with a frown. Tsing Shichen shook his head. 20 years ago, Grandmaster Chu began to travel and give lectures, no longer directly involved in the court affairs. Disturbing him now will only bring disgust. Moreover, Grandmaster Chu has always abided by the ancestral rules and hasn't alienated His Highness all these years. Once something happens, he will definitely support His Highness based on the imperial court and ancestral rules, so there is no need to rope him in. Hearing this, Chui Qingming thought for a moment before nodding and saying, That makes sense. However, even if that's the case, if we can obtain Grandmaster Chu's full support, we will be able to gain the loyalty of all the officials and regain the support of many court officials. It will be of great significance. Then, he sighed and looked at Tsing Shichen. In the past 2 years, our side has suffered heavy losses in the imperial court. Until now, only Lord Tseng and Lord Qin have been able to go against the current. It is truly rare. Otherwise, our side's morale would really plummet, and it would be difficult to recover. Tsing Shichen shook his head. I was just lucky, there's no need for Lord Tsing to be so modest. Then, the two of them discussed a few more matters. A moment later, a few figures walked out of the capital governor's residence. One of them suddenly asked Chui Qingming, Are we really not going to the Chu residence? Chui Qingming shook his head. Although Tsing Shichen's words are reasonable, we still have to go to the Chu residence. His Highness's situation is really not good, and we can't keep quiet like this. In the end, you still can't hold it in. Inside the residence, Tsing Shichen stood in front of the window and shook his head. Prepare the sedan chair. Chapter 847. On New Year's Eve, you are alone at home. It's quite lonely. Why don't you come together? It will be livelier with more people. When Wan Ruoqing was cleaning up the dishes, Li Yi suddenly looked at her and said. Rui had mentioned it to him several times. That day, she asked him to pick up Zomo. On New Year's Eve, the whole family had to reunite. It didn't make any difference whether it was 1 or 2, or 3, or 4. It was better to let them go together, so that no one would be lonely at home. Wan Ruoqing was stunned for a moment. She turned her head and said with a smile, It's not just the few of us. There are many sisters in the brothel who have left their hometown. We have agreed to get together on New Year's Eve. It won't be lonely. By the way, go and talk to Zomo. Zomo should go. We have agreed. Li Yi heard this, nodded slightly, and said, Let's talk about it later. Will you still be here tomorrow? There are still a few scripts that I want to discuss with you. Wan Ruoqing raised her head and asked him, Will you come tomorrow? Yes. Li Yi said with some embarrassment, I haven't paid much attention to the matter of the brothel. It's been hard on you. There is nothing urgent recently, so I should help you share some of the burden. Wan Ruoqing smiled and said, it's not that hard. Li Yi shook his head. No one knew better than him whether she was tired or not, but he didn't say much. When he got up and walked out of the door, he waved his hand and said, see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Wan Ruoqing raised her hand and stood in front of the window. After the figure disappeared, she sat back at the table, opened the drawer, took out the book, and turned to the latest page. The 3rd year of Jinghe, the 28th of the 12th lunar month. Next, there were some happy things. Downstairs, Fong, who was holding a drumstick in his mouth, was also very happy. He held another drumstick in his hand, shook it in front of the sloppy old man, and asked, Su, do you want one? The sloppy old man glanced at him and said coldly, scram. Fong was not angry. He shook his head and said, Su, why do you have to do this? It's just a few teeth. You can just pull them out. Is there a need to suffer like this? Seeing that the sloppy old man was about to flip out, he hurriedly took 2 steps forward and handed over the chicken leg, asking, young master, do you want to eat chicken? Li Yi shook his head and said, you eat by yourself, I'm full. Fong looked up at the attic and nodded to himself. After such a long time, no matter how hungry the son-in-law was, he should be full by now. In front of the sloppy old man, he took a big bite of the drumstick before quickly catching up with Li Yi and asked, young master, do you know what Mars guarding the heart means? Where did you hear about Antares guarding the heart? Li Yi got on the carriage and casually asked. When I was buying the drumstick just now, I heard it from someone. Fong replied, but I didn't really understand what they said. Antares refers to a star in the sky. The heart, Antares, is also a star in the sky. Antares guarding the heart means that these 2 stars meet in the sky. Li Yi thought about it and explained. In fact, these 2 stars were thousands of miles apart, and their sizes were trillions of times different. How could they meet? The so-called Antares guarding the heart was just a visual phenomenon. So it's just 2 stars. Fong curled his lips and put his interest back on the drumstick in his hand. It's not just 2 stars. Antares is called the star of misfortune, and Antares represents the emperor. The meeting of the star of misfortune and the emperor means that the emperor is in trouble. Antares guarding the heart was actually a kind of astrological geomancy. It was pure nonsense, but in the feudal era, many people believed in this. There was a department in the imperial court that specialized in this kind of thing. It was called the imperial astronomer. When they had nothing to do, they would look at the stars and use the astrological signs to predict good or bad luck. Old Fong asked in surprise, is that star really that powerful? Is that for real? Li Yi looked at him snappily. Of course it's bullsh***t, eat your drumstick. This matter, to put it nicely, was called Antares guarding the heart. To put it bluntly, it was the emperor was in trouble and it was time for him to pass away. Of course, there were so many emperors in the world. Jing Kingdom, Zhao Kingdom, Qi Kingdom, Wu Kingdom. Which one would pass away depended on the luck of these emperors. Li Yi wasn't worried about this. Although the old emperor's body wasn't good, he was now taking good care of himself. He wouldn't pass away so soon. Besides, he didn't believe in this. This was something that Li Yi already knew when he was in Ningguangfu. Not thinking about this matter, he waved his hand and said, let's go home. Fong nodded, wiped the grease off his mouth, and asked, which home? In the small courtyard of Willow Lane, Xing Zumo shook her head and said, I'm not going. I want to stay here with Sister Ruoqing. Li Yi said, you can go together. She still shook her head. Li Yi looked at her and said, but you can't live here for the rest of your life. Why not? She glanced up at him and said, I'll stay here. Anyway, with Sister Ruoqing accompanying me, I have things to do every day. No one will bully me. Who will bully you? Li Yi looked at her and said after some thought, besides, Ruoqing will marry someone one day. What will you do then? Xing Zumo was startled. She really hadn't thought about this. Li Yi looked at her and said, at that time, will you still live here with Xiao Chui? For some reason, thinking of Sister Ruoqing getting married, she felt particularly uncomfortable. A thoughtful expression appeared on her face, and she suddenly looked up at Li Yi and said, how about you marry Sister Ruoqing as well? The two of us can take care of each other. It's the same no matter where we are. This time, it was Li Yi's turn to be startled. Happiness had come so suddenly. So Xing Zumo was also so reasonable. He thought about it and said, what you said is not unreasonable. Is it reasonable? She looked at him with wide eyes. Although she seemed to be smiling, the curve of her mouth was full of danger. What you said doesn't make sense at all. Li Yi covered the soft flesh on his waist and said, have you asked for Ruoqing's opinion? Have you asked for my opinion? She looked at Li Yi and suddenly let go of her hand. She lowered her head and said softly, actually, Sister Ruoqing met you before I did, and I can see that she also likes you very much. She just always hides those words in her heart. The two of us have always been together. Seeing her marry someone else, I will also feel uncomfortable. How about, you consider what I just said? Li Yi shook his head and said seriously, don't talk nonsense. It's not good for Ruoqing to hear this. Jumping into a pit once was enough. How stupid was he to fall in the same place twice? She looked at Li Yi, blinked, and then laughed. Okay, I was just joking. I won't let Sister Ruoqing know. You can't make this kind of joke so casually. Li Yi glared at her and gave her a serious ideological education before leaving in satisfaction. Outside Willow Lane, when he got into the carriage, Fong lifted the curtain and asked, young master, which home are we going to this time? To the palace. Li Yi waved his hand. No, I'm really going home this time. There were 2 days until the court conference. Her Highness must be very busy. There was nothing urgent, so it was better to go home and celebrate the new year in peace. In the small courtyard, Xiao Chui poked her head out of the room for the first time. Finally, she couldn't help but walk out and say, Miss, what are you thinking about? It's cold outside. Come inside and think about it. After a few calls, Xing Zumo finally realized and nodded. Yes, go in. She stood up, but her body suddenly fell to the side. Xiao Chui hurried to support her and said with concern, Miss, what's wrong? Don't move, don't move. Her voice was a bit panicked. Stand there and don't move, my feet are numb. Chapter 848. Brother Chui, Brother Qin, what brings you here today? A middle-aged man came out to welcome them. He immediately cupped his hands and said, It's cold outside. Come in. It's been a long time since Grandpa Chu left the capital. Cui Qingze walked forward and asked with a smile, Is Grandpa Chu well? The middle-aged man nodded. The old man has always been healthy. Cui Qingze smiled. Grandpa Chu is 70 years old, but he's still so healthy. He's truly a national treasure. You two young fellows, it's not even the new year yet. Why are you here so early? The two had just stepped into the room when an elderly voice came from ahead. An old man with a head full of white hair and a face like a withered pine tree looked up at the two of them and asked, Is Chen well? Greetings, Grandpa Chu. Chen Chong stepped forward and bowed before saying, My father's health is fine, but he tends to forget things. He's been recuperating at home for the past 2 years. The old man shook his head and said, He was already weak when he was young, unlike Qin Wen and Shen Ku. Sigh, let's not talk about it. Tomorrow is the first day of the Lunar New Year. Why are you here today? After Cui Qingzi bowed, he smiled and said, "We're worried that too many people will come to the Chu Manor after the first day and we won't be able to see Grandpa Chu. As such, we came early to pay our respects." "You're quite eloquent." The old man glanced at him and said, "Have a seat." After the two of them sat down, the old man put down his scroll and asked, "I heard that the imperial court is planning to build academies in the various provinces to allow poor students to study for free?" Cui Qingzi was taken aback and nodded. "That's true. When the previous emperor was still alive, I mentioned this many times, but it was delayed with the excuse that the treasury was tight." "When has the treasury not been tight?" The old man glanced at the two of them and said, "Who came up with this idea to get these people to raise money?" "It's simply brilliant." Cui Qingzi's expression was awkward. He didn't feel good listening to this. He had come today to say that the princess's governance was against etiquette, but he hadn't expected Grandpa Chu to praise the princess before he could say anything. He could only nod and say, "It was Her Highness who came up with this idea. It's that little girl." The old man nodded and said, "I've heard about what she's done in the past 2 years. She's not bad, but it's a pity that she's a woman." Cui Qingzi's eyes lit up and he immediately said, "Yes, although Her Highness has both ability and integrity, she is still a woman. In the future, this great undertaking will still fall on the shoulders of some prince." The old man shook his head and repeated, "What a pity, what a pity." Cui Qingzi suppressed the joy in his heart and said, "Presently, the emperor is unwell and the princess has the ability to manage on his behalf. This is, of course, a good thing. However, Jingdo still needs a suitable prince just in case. What do you think, Master Chu?" The old man glanced at him and said, "You mean the king of Shu? Don't think that I don't know what he's done just because I'm traveling outside. The virtuous king, forcing me to abdicate. Turning into a dragon in the face of a storm. If I was in Jingdo at the time, I would use this walking stick to crack his head open and ask him who taught him all this nonsense." The old man picked up the walking stick beside him and knocked it against the ground. "The emperor is already exceptionally merciful by not chopping off his head." Cui Qingzi was momentarily at a loss for words. After a long time, he said, "Master Chu, you don't know, but His Highness was framed by someone. He would certainly not do such a thing." "Fine, fine." The old man waved his hand and said, "No matter what, he is the emperor's eldest son and has the right of the ancestral system. I only hope that in Shuzhou, he can properly reflect on himself and not make mistakes. If he can turn over a new leaf and has virtuous officials at his side to assist him, it's not impossible for him to become a wise ruler." This was a very clear stance. Cui Qingzi knew that although Master Chu was angry at His Highness's foolish actions, his stance had not changed. He hurriedly said, "His Highness has been diligently studying every day in Shuzhou, quietly reflecting on his mistakes. It has already been a year, and he is no longer the same as before. He will definitely not disappoint Master Chu's expectations." His tone changed as he said, "However, His Majesty's body is seriously ill, the court is in chaos, and there are treacherous officials causing chaos. His Majesty has also delayed summoning His Highness back to the capital." The old man did not wait for him to finish. With a wave of his hand, he interrupted him. "The court is in chaos. Why do I feel that the court is in a rare moment of clarity in the past few decades? As for treacherous officials, His Majesty's numerous actions this year have already gotten rid of many of the treacherous officials in the court. How can there be treacherous officials causing chaos?" Cui Qingzi opened his mouth, but he suddenly did not know what to say. Chen Chong took a sip of tea and quietly savored the Chu estate's fragrant tea. "Does Master Chu know that several days ago, there was a warning of the Antares guarding the heart phenomenon? The Antares guarding the heart is greatly detrimental to the emperor and is a sign of treacherous officials causing chaos in the government. That Marquis of Chang'an, Li Yi, is the only one who is favored by His Majesty, the Antares guarding the heart. His Majesty does indeed live up to these words." The old man nodded, then shook his head. But the Antares guarding the heart is only detrimental to the emperor. There is no intention of treacherous officials causing chaos in the government, right? But, could it be that the Directorate of Astrology has come up with a new theory of astrology? Cui Qingze, Master Chu, this junior will take his leave. A moment later, Cui Qingze and Chen Chong stood up, bowed to the old man's surname Chu, and turned to leave. After watching the two leave, the middle-aged man turned to look at the old man and asked, "Father, why did you?" The old man looked at him and said, "What you hear may be false, but what you see is true. The Chu family has 100 years of good reputation. It is extremely difficult to build a tree, but it is extremely easy to destroy it. Remember this." The middle-aged man bowed respectfully. "This child has learned his lesson." Li. The old man murmured, then yawned. I'm tired. If there's anything, let's talk when I wake up." In front of the Chu residence, Cui Qingze took a deep breath and calmed his emotions with great difficulty. Chen Chong shook his head and said, "The outcome is already very good." At least Master Chu was willing to say those words. At the critical moment, he will definitely speak up for His Highness. Still not enough. Cui Qingze let out a long sigh and murmured. What he wanted was not what Grand Tutor Chu said, but what he did. If this scholar of the Jing Kingdom was willing to take a clear-cut stand on their side, it was equivalent to them obtaining the support of all the scholars in the world at the same time. How could the effect be compared to a mere sentence? As if thinking of something, Cui Qingze asked again, "Is Antares guarding the heart really not a treacherous official who wants to disrupt the government?" Chen Chong thought for a moment, then said, "Brother Cui, when you go back, you might as well read more books." "Uncle Cui, Uncle Chin." A voice came from ahead. Cui Qingze turned his head and saw the newcomers. He smiled and said, "Oh, it's Chu Ping. Why didn't you visit the estate this time?" Chu Ping said somewhat embarrassedly, "I plan to visit in a few days." After greeting the two, Chu Ping entered the estate while Chen Chong and Cui Qingze got on the carriage. Cui Qingze glanced at the Chu estate and said, "I heard that Chu Ping has been spending a lot of time with that child from the Wei family recently." Chen Chong looked at him, and his eyes flickered. Then, he nodded slowly. "They have been getting closer recently." Cui Qingze patted his robes and smiled. "Getting closer is good, getting closer is good." Chapter 849. I'm here. Brother Cui, farewell. Farewell. After bidding farewell to Cui Qingze, Chen Chong returned to the estate and went straight to his study. He picked up a brush, thought for a moment, and then switched the brush to his other hand. He wrote a few lines, put it into an envelope, and sealed it with clay. He raised his head and asked, "What is third young lady doing?" The servant girl at the door immediately replied, "Young lady is bathing and will be going out in a moment." These past years, if he had not taken the initiative to accompany her out to relax, Miao Yu would not have so easily left the estate. But these days, she was going out almost every 2 days. Chen Chong naturally knew where she was going. He put the envelope in his sleeve and lightly said, "When Miao Yu comes out, let me know." "Yes." The servant girl lightly replied. Chen Chong returned to his desk and casually took out a book. After flipping through it, he murmured, "Antares guarding the heart," in a street in the capital. A woman carrying bags of various sizes turned her head and smiled. "Young lady, you treat these children so well. No wonder they often talk about you." Wan Ruoqing also carried some things. She smiled. "They have no parents and usually come to the brothel to help out. Tonight is New Year's Eve, so it's only right to send some things over. This year, everyone is celebrating at the brothel. Why don't we also call them over? The more people there, the livelier it will be." The place where the two of them were at was not in the downtown area, but in the poorer residences of the capital. A dozen or so steps behind them, there were several figures following from a distance. The woman nodded. If these children are here tonight, it will definitely be more interesting. The two of them came to the front of a small courtyard and knocked on the door. Soon, the sound of cheerful footsteps could be heard from within. When the door opened, a little girl with 2 pigtails appeared. Seeing them, she said in pleasant surprise, "Elder sister Ruoqing, you've come." The woman beside her pretended to frown and said with dissatisfaction, "You only see elder sister Ruoqing." The little girl immediately put on a look of pleasant surprise and widened her eyes. "Elder sister Xiao Lu, you've come too." Wan Ruoqing stooped down, touched her little head, and said, "Xiao Bei, you're wearing very beautiful clothes today, and your hair is also very beautiful. Did Sister Shuang comb it for you?" Hearing elder sister Ruoqing praise her clothes and braid, the little girl was even happier. Her eyes curved into crescent moons as she hurriedly said, "It's not elder sister Shuang. Elder sister Shuang wouldn't comb such beautiful braids. It's Big Brother who did it for me. The beautiful clothes were also given to us by Big Brother." Big Brother. Wan Ruoqing's face was filled with confusion. "Sister Ruoqing is here." A burst of cheerful voices came from the room, and a few figures immediately ran out. They were all children. The oldest was 12 or 13 years old, and the youngest was only 6 or 7 years old. When they saw Wan Ruoqing, their faces were full of surprise and excitement. Of course, there were also older ones. Li Yi walked out of the room with a little girl holding his hand. When he saw Wan Ruoqing, he was surprised for a moment before he smiled and said, "What a coincidence, elder sister Ruoqing, the candied plums that Big Brother gave us are so delicious." "Try one." The girl named Xiao Bei ran out of the room and put a candied plum in Wan Ruoqing's hand. After thinking about it, she ran in and took another for Li Yi before running away again. Li Yi threw the candied plum into his mouth and said, "Yesterday, I heard from Elder's son that these children are lonely and helpless. It's not easy for them to support themselves in the brothel. It's almost the new year, so I came to see them, they're all poor children." Wan Ruoqing looked at the figures running around in the yard with a smile on her face and said, "When they grow up, I can teach them some things. In the future, they won't have to worry about living in the brothel." Li Yi knew that she had lived a hard life since she was a child. After experiencing those hardships, she would be full of pity for people who had the same experience or worse situation. Of course, it was not pure pity. Even the porridge at the door of the brothel would be earned by the beggars through their own labor. Now, the beggars in the capital no longer had to worry about not having enough to eat. For those who were willing to work hard, they even had extra money. Not to mention that there were no beggars in the capital, but the life of the beggars in the capital was undoubtedly much better than that of the beggars in other places. Tonight was New Year's Eve, and both of them had many things to do. After seeing the children, they walked back together. "I've been thinking about it for the past few days. If we want to extend our brothel to the Qi Kingdom, it's not impossible. However, we first need to nurture some trustworthy people there." On the way, Wan Ruoqing mentioned the matter that he had mentioned a few days ago. He shook his head and said, "If it's only one prefecture, it'll be easier. However, if it's the entire Qi Kingdom, it'll be a huge obstacle. This matter is not so urgent." Li Yi shook his head and said, "In fact, the Jing Kingdom is already big enough. If we expand further, it may be out of control. For the time being, let's take it one step at a time." The two of them talked for a while, and they could already see the brothel in front. "Get out of here. You've dirtied my clothes. Can you afford to pay for it?" A harsh voice suddenly sounded in front of them. Li Yi turned his head and saw a luxuriously dressed young man holding the hem of his clothes. He looked at the beggar who had fallen on the ground with a look of disgust and was about to leave. Please please save my child. She's very sick. Please, I beg you. A woman in ragged clothes knelt on the ground. She was holding a little girl of 4 or 5 years old tightly in her arms. The little girl's eyes were closed, and her face was dirty. One could still see that she was pale. Get out of here, get out of here. I'm not a doctor. How can I save her? The young man looked at her with disgust again. He suddenly tore off his clothes and walked away quickly. The woman was dragged to the ground, but she still held the little girl tightly. Her eyes were lifeless, and she kept murmuring, "Save her, save her. She's only 5 years old. She's only 5 years old." Seeing a white figure walk in front of him and walk away quickly, Li Yi smiled and slowly followed. Wan Ruoqing walked over and bent down to look at the woman. She asked with concern, "Aunt, what happened?" The woman looked up at her. Just as she was about to open her mouth, her eyes suddenly widened. Her body trembled and she couldn't speak. Wan Ruoqing looked surprised. "Auntie, auntie," Li Yi squatted down beside her and reached out to touch the little girl's forehead. He turned back and said to Fong, "The little girl has a fever. Time is urgent. Take her to see a doctor first." Fong strode over and wanted to take the child from the woman's arms. However, he found that the child was held tightly by the woman. He said helplessly, "Sister-in-law, the child is important." The woman finally came back to her senses. She hurriedly let go of the child, but she immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly, "Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Let's go." Fong picked up the child, looked at her, and strode out of the crowd. The woman stood up, looked deeply at Wan Ruoqing, and quickly disappeared into the crowd. After the crowd dispersed, Li Yi shook his head and said indignantly, "I was the one who helped her. Why did she only thank you?" Wan Ruoqing smiled and said, "Maybe that aunt was too anxious just now." Recalling the scene just now, Li Yi said in surprise, "Why did she call you madam?" Wan Ruoqing shook her head and murmured, "She must have mistaken me for someone else." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "It's also possible that she mistook you for Goddess Guanyin." Wan Ruoqing was stunned, and then a trace of panic appeared on her pretty face. She shook her head repeatedly and said, "How can I compare to Goddess Guanyin? You can't say such things carelessly." Li Yi looked at her and said, "Goddess Guanyin saves people from suffering and delivers all living beings from suffering. Our Miss Ruoqing is also kind-hearted and saves people from danger. How can we not compare?" Hearing him say, "Our Miss Ruoqing," Wan Ruoqing blushed. She lowered her head and hurriedly said, I'll go in first." Li Yi looked at her back as she left in a panic. He smiled and slowly followed her. On the street, the old man supported by the middle-aged man knocked the ground with his crutch and asked, "Is that the sycophant?" The middle-aged man nodded and said, "Yes, he is Li Yi." The old man turned his head and looked in the direction where the young man had left and asked, "That bastard just now, whose family is he from?" The middle-aged man had a complicated expression and said in a low voice, it seems, he is from a branch of the Chui family." Chapter 850. Let's close the brothel early today. There shouldn't be many customers on New Year's Eve. After a few more days of rest, it'll be time to get busy again. When she walked out of the brothel again, Li Yi was carrying a pile of things in her arms. Most of them were scripts that she wanted to take to Willow Alley to read. Wan Ruoqing shook her head and said, "Tomorrow is the first day of the Chinese New Year. We can rest for another day. After the second day, there will be more customers. We can't be idle until the Lantern Festival." In previous years, the number of customers in these few days is equivalent to a few months of normal days. Silver is something that can never be earned. Doing this will actually lose the original intention. Li Yi shook her head. When she was about to speak again, she suddenly threw the stack of books in her hand into the air. She bent over to support an old man who was leaning on a walking stick and almost falling. Then, she reached out with her other hand and let the stack of books land firmly in her hand. "Old man, are you all right?" Seeing that the old man had steadied himself, he let go of his hand and asked. The old man waved his hand and looked him up and down. "Young man, you're quite skilled." Li Yi looked at him. The horizontal wrinkles on his face were like tree bark. From his appearance, he looked even older than second great-uncle. Li Yi asked in surprise, "Old man, may I know your age?" A smile appeared on the old man's withered face. He stroked his beard and said, "I'm 73 years old this year." Hearing the old man's words, even Ruoqing, who was standing at the side, was surprised. Normally, people who could live to 50 years old were considered to have lived a long life. 60 years old was even rarer. Those who could live to 70 years old were already considered to be ancestors. An ancestor like this old man who was still running around alone at such an old age was even rarer. Li Yi also knew the meaning of 73 years old in this world. He asked in confusion, "Old man, why are you out alone? Where's your family?" The old man still had a smile on his face. He said, I'm just bored at home and came out for a walk." As he spoke, his eyes were fixed on the young man in front of him. He looked at the youngest marquis in the Jing Kingdom, the minister of Jin Ziguang, the first scholar in the Jing Kingdom, unparalleled in poetry and literature, and well-versed in classics, Li Yi, the sycophant that Cui Qingze had mentioned. From what had happened just now, he had a preliminary understanding of him. But it was still too early to make a final conclusion. That was why he had the scene just now and was about to test him. He looked at Li Yi and smiled. "You, then continue to stroll. We'll be leaving first. There are many people on the street, so remember to be careful when you walk. Don't fall again." The old man stood on the street with his walking stick and looked ahead. Until the young man, he saw the young man walk. He closed his mouth slowly after the young man and the woman disappeared. Li Yi also smiled and looked in a certain direction. He turned to look at Wan Ruoqing and said, "Let's go." The old man stood on the street with his walking stick and looked ahead. He didn't close his mouth until the young man and the woman disappeared. A pondering look appeared on the old man's face. A moment later, he asked, "Was it a little fake when I fell just now?" "Ah, was it?" The middle-aged man nodded and said in a low voice, "Yes, it was too fake." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Didn't you notice it just now?" Wan Ruoqing shook her head and said, "No. When I noticed it, you had already helped the old man up." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Although that old man is not young, his body is very strong. He could have thrown away that walking stick. He actually fell down on purpose just now. Moreover, there was another person watching us in the dark. It's very likely that he's his accomplice. Although the old man was very old, he might not even be as good as an actor in terms of acting skills. If it was in the future, he would definitely be beaten to death." A puzzled expression appeared on Wan Ruoqing's face as she said, But why did he? You're just too kind, too pure." Li Yi looked at her and said solemnly, "Nowadays, public morals are getting worse day by day, and people's hearts are no longer what they used to be. Those bad people have many tricks up their sleeves. For example, that old man just now. If he said that he was knocked down by us and that he suffered a serious internal injury, then he stopped us on the street and asked us to pay him a large sum of money. What should we do? Besides, he has an accomplice in the dark. If he helps him to make false testimony, how can we reason with him?" A look of disbelief appeared on Wan Ruoqing's face. She really hadn't thought about it carefully. However, such an old man, even if he went to the government office, he had to sit in front of the court. Even the county magistrate had to bow to him and serve him carefully. If he really insisted that they were the culprit, then, recalling the kind-looking old man just now, she looked at Li Yi and asked uncertainly, but, the old man just now didn't look like that kind of person. Then do you believe him or me? I believe you. That's right. I won't lie to you. Li Yi nodded with satisfaction and warned, it's a good thing that you are kind, but you have to be more careful. Don't be deceived by some people with bad intentions. Wan Ruoqing nodded obediently and said, I know. Are you really not going over today? In the small courtyard in Willow Lane, Li Yi had confirmed with Zui Mo countless times. She shook her head and said, no, I'll stay here with Sister Ruoqing. You don't have to worry about our place being deserted. At night, the sisters in the brothel are all together, and the sisters in the shop who can't go home also come together. It's more lively than your home. Li Yi shook his head and corrected her, it's our home. She glanced at him and repeated, your home. Li Yi raised a hand and asked, whose home? Xing Zui Mo blushed, and a strange feeling came from a certain part of her body. This was his usual method of correcting himself. She rolled her eyes at him and said, your home. Our home. After a few slaps, she leaned into Li Yi's arms with a flushed face and whispered, don't be like this. Sister Ruoqing is still at home. She went to take a bath and won't come out for a while. Li Yi looked around and said, other than Xiao Chui, who is hiding behind the tree, nobody saw it. Xiao Chui. Xing Zui Mo hurriedly came out of Li Yi's arms, lifted her skirt, and ran under the osmanthus tree in the yard. Xiao Chui, miss, the little maid's panicked voice came not long after. Miss, I did it on purpose. No, I did it on purpose. Li, help. Li Yi didn't know what she did to Xiao Chui. Not long after, Xiao Chui ran out with a red face, covering her butt. A moment later, Zui Mo also came out of the room. This is for you. She handed an envelope to Li Yi. What is this? Li Yi was surprised. What can't be said face to face, this is for you from Lord Xing. After she finished speaking, she handed him another letter and said, this is for you from Mrs. Qin. Chapter 851. Certseng, Madam Qin. Li Yi held the two letters, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. If third Miss Qin had something to say, she could just say it directly when they met here. There was no need to beat around the bush and be so mysterious. This kind of sneaky thing seemed to be Minister Chen's style. What was written in Xing Shichen's letter that he wanted to pass it to him through Zumo? Li Yi first opened Xing Shichen's letter. There was only one piece of paper inside, and it was written in large characters, the Chui family wants to move, be careful of the Chu family. The literal meaning was that the Chui family had been silent for so long and was about to make a move. It also told him to be careful of the Chu family. Chu family, it sounded somewhat familiar. Could the Chui family's actions have something to do with the Chu family? After a closer look, he found 4 words at the bottom of the letter, burn after reading. There was no hurry to burn it. Li Yi put the letter aside and opened the other one. The handwriting on the letter was crooked like a dog's crawl. It was definitely not written by third Miss Qin, but it was just as he had guessed. Bewildered heart, treacherous officials, take care. Although Minister Qin had written a few more words than Assistant Minister Zhang, the meaning expressed was a bit unclear. Bewildered heart clearly meant that the emperor had passed away. What did it have to do with treacherous officials? Could it be that Minister Qin also studied horoscopes and planned to overturn the unreliable conclusion made by the predecessors? Besides, with the empress in charge, how could there be treacherous officials in the court? Who would dare to mess up the government? Taking 10,000 steps back, even if there were treacherous officials, the ones who should be worried should be the treacherous officials themselves. What did it have to do with him? Why did he tell him to take care? His gaze moved again. There were also 4 words at the bottom of the letter, burn after reading. Both of them sent him letters at the same time. Clearly, they hadn't communicated before. It seemed that the rumors about Assistant Minister Zhang and Minister Qin in the court weren't completely groundless. This tacit understanding couldn't be matched by ordinary people. Xing Zumo looked at him and asked worriedly, "Is there something important?" Li Yi shook his head and said, "It's just a small matter. Don't worry, your husband is very powerful." "Who's worried?" Xing Zumo glanced at her and said in a low voice, "Whose husband are you? All right, it's getting late. We should head back." Li Yi shook his head. In the end, he didn't want to force her too much. At most, he would spend a little more time running around. Before he left, he reminded her, "By the way, remember to burn those 2 letters." Xing Zumo nodded and watched him walk out the door. A pair of scissors was waved in her hand like a weapon. Her speed was so fast that even Li Yi could not see it clearly. Soon, there were all kinds of window flowers in her hand, and she distributed them to the maids to put up. Lin Wanru could not help much. Rui was decorating the ancestral shrine, so she carried Li Duan in the courtyard to bask in the sun. The little guy was very familiar with her now, but when he was hungry, his hands would not behave, which occasionally made Li Yi feel a little embarrassed. The New Year's Eve dinner was eaten by many people. In terms of atmosphere, it was naturally more lively than the previous 2 years. After that, they made dumplings together to celebrate the new year. Eating dumplings on the first day of the new year was a long-standing custom in the Jing kingdom. After dinner, there was still a long time before dawn. The 2 old madams' bodies could not last until then, so they went to bed early. Duanmu sat there for a while and dozed off, and was also taken away by her aunt. After playing mahjong for more than an hour, Li Duan was startled awake by the sound of firecrackers outside. He cried incessantly. Rui hurried to comfort him, but was entangled by him and could not get away. Li Yi saw that Lin Wanru also looked tired, so he tidied up the table and said, "Miss Lin should also go to sleep." Lin Wanru got up and bade farewell. Li Yi felt a weight on his shoulder. Xiaohuan leaned on his shoulder and fell asleep. With great difficulty, he carried her back to the room, covered her with the quilt, closed the door and quietly walked out. The courtyard, which was bustling just now, suddenly became quiet. The sound of firecrackers could be faintly heard from afar, flashing in the sky. That was the fireworks set off by the rich families, illuminating the entire sky from time to time. On the stone table in the courtyard, a figure that was somewhat blurred by the flashes of the sky, looked at a certain direction of the night sky, and drank by himself. Still not sleeping. Li Yi walked over and sat opposite her. "Noisy." Mississippi Lu replied with one word. Li Yi poured himself a cup of wine, then asked, "Are you not used to so many people?" "It's all right." Mississippi Lu took a sip of wine. Her eyes moved away from him. "There is wine but no dishes." Li Yi looked at the table, shook his head, stood up and left. Not long after, he came back again, holding a tray in his hand. On it were a few cold dishes. Mississippi Lu did not seem to be in a good mood. Li Yi passed a pair of chopsticks over and said, "It's boring to drink alone, I will drink with you." "You?" Mississippi Lu finally looked away, looked at him and asked, "How many cups can you drink?" "Isn't it just grape wine? How many cups? You are underestimating me too much." Li Yi disdainfully glanced at the glass wine pot that he usually used to store grape wine on the table, picked up the cup and drank it in one gulp. The spicy taste almost made his tears come out. After covering his throat and coughing a few times, he raised his head and looked at her, widened his eyes and asked, "What degree is it?" "You can't drink it." Mississippi Lu stretched out 5 fingers and said, "Go to sleep." This was looking down on him. Li poured another cup and said, "Isn't it just hard liquor? I'm not even afraid of you, why would I be afraid of it?" Mississippi Lu picked up the wine cup, toasted across the table, and drank it in one gulp. Li also drank it in one gulp. "Cough, cough, forget it, you should go to sleep. I'm telling you, don't look down on me, then, again, I'll do it. Rui, tell me, what's bothering you?" After a moment, Li hooked his arm around Mississippi Lu's neck, his eyes blurred. "I can give you anything you want, what's there to worry about? Tell me, whatever you want, I can give it to you." Mississippi Lu frowned, stood up, held his arm, and said lightly, "You're drunk, I'll send you back to your room." "I'm not drunk." Li waved his hand, looked at her, and his eyes became serious, and said, "Do you know, in fact, the person I admire the most is you." "Admire me for what?" Mississippi Lu frowned, held him, and asked casually as they walked to the door step by step. "I admire you for being beautiful, good at martial arts, and so cool. The leader of the martial arts world, it sounds so majestic. Tell me, what's there to worry about?" A hint of thought appeared on Li's face, and suddenly became enlightened, and said, "I know, because you can't beat Emingzu." Mississippi Lu stopped in her tracks, and frowned. "I can't beat her?" "Oh, it's okay." Li's body swayed, and after standing up straight, he patted her chest and said, "Although you can't beat her, you're older than her. If you practice more, you'll definitely catch up to her. She will never catch up to you." Chapter 852. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. His head hurt a little, and his mind was in a mess. He had a dream last night. The moment he woke up, he didn't know what he dreamed of, but he suddenly felt a little empty. After sitting up from the bed, his face changed. In his memory, he was drinking and chatting happily with second Miss Lu under the moonlight. He closed his eyes and opened them again. How did he end up on the bed? Could it be that last night, both of them were drunk, and then, Li Yi's face was a little pale. He looked down and found that the clothes from yesterday were still on his body, and Mississippi Lu wasn't sleeping beside him. Only then did he feel relieved. Fortunately, he was only drunk and didn't do anything reckless after getting drunk, but why did his butt hurt so much? Could it be that it wasn't him who did reckless things to Mississippi Lu, but Mississippi Lu did it to him? Thinking of this, he had a terrible headache. He couldn't remember anything about what happened last night at all. Xiao Huan walked in from outside and handed him a wet towel first. Then, she brought a cup of tea over and said, "Young master, you're awake. Have some tea to sober up." Li drank the tea in one breath and asked, "Where's second miss?" "Practicing martial arts in the yard." Li got out of bed and only put on an outer shirt. When he walked out of the room, he saw Mississippi Lu in white, doing Tai Chi leisurely. Her hair was tied up high, and she looked a little heroic. Li couldn't care less. He rubbed his butt and walked over. He looked at her suspiciously and asked, "What did you do to me last night?" Mississippi Lu didn't pay attention to him immediately. She finished a set of moves and slowly stopped. Then, she glanced at him and said, "You were drunk last night. When I sent you back to your room, you rolled off the bed many times." "How do you know that I rolled off the bed many times?" The doubt on Li Yi's face didn't disappear. Even if she rolled off the bed, it was impossible that she only fell on her but every time. Second Miss Lu said lightly, "I stayed by your bedside for the whole night." "You stayed by my bed all night?" Li Yi looked at her with his eyes wide open. "You watched me roll off the bed every time. When you fell asleep last night, you called a name 98 times. You're too." Li Yi paused and looked at her and asked, "What?" "When you fell asleep last night, you called a name 98 times. Mississippi Lu repeated again. "Trick, it was definitely a trick." Had she forgotten that he was the one who told her, "Journey to the West"? She didn't even change the numbers. This trick was extremely insincere. Li Yi shook his head and said, "I slept alone last night. Maybe I'm not used to it. I probably mistook you for Rui." Second young lady Lu nodded, agreeing with his answer. Then she said, "You asked drunken Mo to call you 84 times. This." Li Yi hesitated for a moment. He looked at her and asked, "You can understand, right?" "I can understand." Mississippi Lu nodded again and then crossed her arms. She asked again, "But you called Mingzu 88 times, Ruoqing 96 times, Xiaohuan 13 times, Shaning twice. How do you want me to understand?" The little servant girl stood at the back and was overjoyed. Although the young master only called her 13 times in his dream, as long as she knew that the young master had her in his heart, it was fine even if it was just once. Li Yi shook his head. This was obviously nonsense. It was impossible for him to do nothing the whole night and just call out these names. He relaxed and looked at her. Raising his eyebrows, he said, "Say, I said these names the whole night, and you just listened on the side for the whole night. How bored are you?" Mississippi Lu, of course, would not be bored to the point of staying by his bed and listening to him call these names. She just wanted to confirm that he finally said Rui 521 times. Could it be that he was still thinking about the hundreds of thousands of taels of silver that he gave her? "I'm just joking. Don't be nervous." She looked at Li Yi deeply, waved her hand and turned to leave. "Who's nervous?" Li Yi stroked his chest. After washing up, he walked out of the door and murmured, "I feel like I've forgotten something. Oh yes, I remember. Dumplings. I woke up late and haven't eaten the dumplings." When he walked out of the room, he saw the old mistress coming in from outside. After seeing him, a trace of surprise immediately appeared on her face. She asked, Why are you still here?" Li Yi was a little confused. It was the first day of the new year. Where else could he be? "Why didn't you attend the Grand Court Conference?" "Grand Court Conference?" Li Yi was stunned. After thinking for a while, he turned and asked Xiaohuan, "What's the date today? Strange. What's wrong with this kid today? Why isn't he here yet?" In the main hall, old General Shui leaned against a pillar and tilted his head to look. He said doubtfully, "The Grand Court Conference was a grand event that was only held once a year. Not only the local officials and nobles would come to the capital, but the officials and nobles of the capital would also definitely attend." It had been almost 4 hours since the Grand Court Conference started, but there was still no sign of him. Could it be that this kid did not intend to come today? Old General Shui looked up. The emperor was unwell, so the dragon throne was naturally empty. The eldest princess sat on the phoenix throne with a phoenix hairpin hanging on her head. When she looked at the officials who were reporting their work, she actually had a dignified air that did not lose to the emperor, in front of the hall. A general who had taken off his armor bowed. "Your Highness, General Su Dingyuan led 30,000 soldiers and fought against 50,000 Zhao soldiers in Suzhou. He won a great victory and captured the general who supports the Zhao kingdom, Wu Yunkai. With the divine weapon of Tian Fa, he killed 5,000 enemies, captured more than 10,000 enemies, and seized 3 cities." The capital magistrate, Lu Dao, stepped forward with a ceremonial tablet in his hand. "Your Highness, 5 prefectures in Jiangyi and 7 prefectures in Wannan have donated 5,320,000 taels of silver. They have all been returned to the treasury." After Lu Dao left, an 11-year-old youth dressed in a golden python robe stepped forward. He cupped his fists and said, "Your Highness, the first batch of 105 students from the academy have already graduated before the new year. They are waiting for the Ministry of Personnel to make arrangements." The former capital magistrate, the current left minister, Dong Wenyun, said, the autumn reform involves a total of 6 ministries and 13 departments. More than half of it has been completed, the imperial physician, Lu Jimin, said. After the improvement of the method of midwifery, the chances of a woman dying from dystocia have been greatly reduced. County Marquis Li's suturing technique has also made great contributions on the battlefield. Li Mingzhu calmly looked at the officials of the various departments reporting their work. Although 4 hours had passed, there was not the slightest impatience on her face. Over the past year, too many changes had taken place in the Jing state, and from the words of the people below, she would always hear the same name. She tilted her head and looked in a certain direction. There was no one in the seat that should not be empty. When Li Yi walked into the palace, the long queue on both sides had gradually dispersed. Looking at the crowd walking out of the hall, he knew that there was no need for him to come. A figure strode over from the front and pressed on his shoulder. He questioned, the imperial court conference has already ended. Why are you only here now? Since you didn't come, I had to let Prince Jean go in your place. I'm not here to participate in the imperial court conference. Li Yi looked at old General Shui and shook his head in confusion. He said, I'm just taking a walk, old Shui, see you later. He turned and walked in another direction. He raised his hand and waved at old General Shui casually. Chapter 853. This bastard, General Shui shook his head and said as he watched him leave. What kind of opportunity was the Grand Court Assembly? Officials from all over the country would gather here. If he could make a name for himself in the Grand Court Assembly, his name would be known throughout the country. Moreover, even if he was not present today, the merits of heavenly punishment, the merits of education, and the merits of reform would all be attributed to him. From today onwards, the name Li Yi would truly be known throughout the court. Not only the court in the capital, but the officials of the various provinces would also not easily forget this name. Not far behind him, Cui Qingze, Chen Chong, and Xing Shichen walked side by side. Cui Qingze looked at the back of the figure, his eyes drifting, and murmured, this Marquis Li is really famous today. Chen Chong rubbed his hands and also sighed, today is really cold. Xing Shichen wrapped his robe and nodded, yes. Li Yi walked to the door of the morning dew hall. Knowing that the princess had returned, he walked in. The maid at the door knew that the Marquis Li did not need to inform the princess when he came, so she let him enter the room. There was a huge sand table in the room. The sand dunes on it rose and fell, and there were all kinds of intersecting lines. Mingzhu stuck 3 small flags on a few sand dunes. When Li Yi walked in, he happened to see this scene. Another city of the Zhao kingdom has been conquered? Mingzhu looked back at him walking in and nodded, saying, it was originally a counterattack, but General Su made a prompt decision and pursued the enemy. He captured a general of the Zhao kingdom and conquered 3 cities in a row. This time, Li Yi did not reply, but looked at the princess in surprise. More accurately, he was looking at her attire. Only the empress could wear the phoenix crown, but today's Grand Court Conference was presided over by her. In order to distinguish her status, she still had a phoenix hairpin on her head. With the phoenix hairpin on, not only did she not look more feminine, but she looked domineering from afar. This was also the first time he had seen this attire. It was elegant and dignified, but it also had a different kind of temptation. Mingzhu turned her head and asked, why didn't you attend court today? I drank a little last night. Li Yi rubbed his head and said, I accidentally overslept. Mingzhu frowned. It's not like you don't know your alcohol tolerance. Why are you so careless? Last night, he had wanted to prove himself to Mississippi Lu, but he had overestimated himself. As he drank, he lost consciousness. He did not know if she had taken advantage of him when she helped him back to his room. He shook his head to dispel these thoughts and asked, is everything going well? The Grand Court Assembly is held every year, and the protocol is fixed. It's not like it's going to be smooth or not, it's just following the prescribed order. She pointed at the sand table in front of her and the detailed reports of the various ministries on the table beside it. She thought about the changes in the Jing kingdom over the past year and murmured, although the imperial court meeting is the same, the world is different after all. Li Yi just looked at her like this. At this moment, it seemed that he really saw an emperor who looked down on the world. As for this world, they had gone through many hardships and fought for it step by step. Of course, there were more hardships waiting for them on this road. Your Highness, His Majesty summons you. A palace made of the Morning Dew Palace came in with a eunuch and said respectfully. Li Yi yawned and said, "Go ahead. I'll find a place to rest for a while. I didn't sleep well yesterday." The eunuch stepped forward and said, "His Majesty said that if County Marquis Li is also here, he can go with you. I know my body. It's like this every year. After another half a month, when the weather is warmer, I will naturally be better." Emperor Jing lay on the soft bed and looked at the old man sitting on the chair beside him. Facing the ruler of the country, the old man's tone was still neither slow nor slow. Your Majesty's body is important, but the country's politics are related to the livelihood of the people. It cannot be neglected. Emperor Jing shook his head and said, "Grand Tutor, you don't have to worry about this. During this time, Emingsu has been managing the government on my behalf. The court is stable and everything is smooth. If not, I would not have been able to rest in peace. Although the princess is talented, it is not the right way for a woman to manage the government. She can't last long." The old man looked at him and said slowly. Emperor Jing nodded and asked, "Grand Tutor, have you also heard of the Antares guarding heart celestial phenomenon?" The old man nodded and said, "I have heard of it." Emperor Jing looked up and said, "Could it be that my time has really come? Although the Antares guarding heart celestial phenomenon has appeared, nothing is absolute. His Majesty probably does not believe in this." The old man shook his head and said, "But this abnormal celestial phenomenon may be a warning. The position of the Eastern Palace has been empty for a long time. His Majesty should also set a standard early and set an example for the people of the world." Emperor Jing nodded and said, "I naturally know about this." Seeing this, the old man did not speak again. As the Grand Tutor and also the Emperor's teacher, he had to remind the Emperor of this. But if he went further, it would be a little overboard. Although he had retired for many years, he still had a measure of these things in his heart. "It is a pity that I did not attend today's court meeting." Emperor Jing opened a long memorial. His eyes flashed and he murmured, "If I could be 10 years younger, I would not have to let Emingsu shoulder such a heavy burden." The old man also had a look of approval in his eyes. He nodded and said, "Although the eldest princess is a woman, her filial piety is commendable. She can be said to be a woman who is not inferior to men." Emperor Jing smiled and asked, "Grand Tutor, you have been traveling for 3 years. I wonder what interesting things you have heard along the way." The old man nodded and said, "The more I have traveled, the more I have seen." The two talked and laughed in the hall. Outside the hall, Li Yi shook his head and said, "Can't you just pretend that I have not been there?" Emingsu glanced at him and did not speak. The two were led in by a eunuch. The eunuch bowed and said, "Your Majesty, the eldest princess and County Marquis Li have arrived." "Greetings, Father." "Greetings, Your Majesty." After stepping into the hall and bowing, Li Yi raised his head and was stunned when he saw the old man sitting in front of the old emperor's bed. The old man stood up and bowed to Emingsu, "Greetings, Princess." Emingsu walked over and supported him with both hands. She quickly said, "Grand Tutor, you don't have to be so polite. Please sit down." "Grand Tutor." Li Yi looked at the blackmailer old man he met yesterday and was even more surprised. The blackmailer old man looked at him and a smile appeared on his bark-like face. He said, "Young man, we meet again." Emingsu looked at the old man and her eyes finally stopped on Li Yi. Emperor Jing looked surprised and asked, Grand Tutor, you have already met him? Chapter 854. When I was on the street yesterday, I saw a shabby woman with a seriously ill child in her arms. She asked for help, but was ignored by others. Only one person stepped forward bravely and helped her. The old man stroked his beard and said, I just didn't expect that the young man who helped the needy was County Marquis Li. Li also didn't expect that the blackmailer old man he met yesterday was actually the imperial tutor of the imperial court, the teacher of the emperor, a famous Confucian scholar, and an example in the hearts of scholars in the Jing kingdom. Such a person was reduced to blackmailing in the street, which showed how bad the morals of the Jing kingdom had become. Her Royal Highness should pay more attention to the construction of the style in the future. As soon as Li Yi's voice fell, Mingzhu's originally nervous expression suddenly relaxed. Jing Emperor looked at the two of them in surprise. Is there such a thing? The old man smiled and said, Yesterday on the long street, passers-by all looked at the mother and daughter coldly. Only County Marquis Li was willing to help, which shows that your Majesty has a good judgment of people. With such a character, he can be called a pillar of the country. Jing Emperor nodded and said with a smile, That's right. Although this child usually plays around a lot, I am very confident in his character. Grand Tutor was able to judge his character with just one look. Isn't it because you have a pair of discerning eyes? Li Yi looked at the two of them and secretly said, How shameless. He was the one who had the heart of a bodhisattva, was willing to help others, was handsome, elegant. Yet, this blackmailer Grand Tutor and the old emperor actually praised themselves. This kind of behavior was simply unheard of. He secretly glanced at Her Royal Highness and found that her face was calm. Maybe she had long been used to this kind of shameless scene. After feeling his gaze, she turned her head and slightly raised her eyebrows, signaling him to be calm. Li Yi helplessly lowered his head. He came out in a hurry in the morning and didn't eat anything. He was still thinking about the dumplings. The two of them did not know when they talked about the Grand Court Conference. The old man stroked his beard again and looked at Li Yi in surprise, saying, I only knew that he was outstanding in literature, but I didn't know that he had such achievements. He even has such views on the country. Oh, I remember. The young hero that Qin Wen mentioned a few days ago and the reform method proposed coincides with his ideas these years. It should be him. His ability is not limited to this. Jing Emperor smiled and turned to look at Li Yi, saying, In today's Grand Court Conference, the officials of various provinces returned to the capital to report their work and put forward many political opinions. They put forward a lot of political opinions. The preliminary reform of the 6 ministries is almost finished. What do you think? The old man surnamed Chu also looked over. Ideas. Li Yi turned to look at Her Royal Highness and murmured, Yes, what ideas do I have? Mingzhu looked at him and walked forward. She said to Jing Emperor, Father, just now in the morning dew hall, I had a deep discussion with Dr. Li about what I saw and heard in the recent Grand Court Conference. He believes that the reform of the Ministry of Revenue's tax system still needs to be improved. The reform of the local military system is a bit too hasty. It should be done step by step so that it can be stable. Li Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at Her Royal Highness, who spoke confidently in the face of the old emperor and the blackmailer, he felt that it was not in vain that he brought her soups so many times. Then his eyes couldn't help but look at her chest. He was slightly startled and realized that his efforts were not in vain. After listening to her, Jing Emperor nodded with satisfaction and said, There are some things that I wanted to remind you about, but now it seems that there is no need to do so. The blackmailer also had a strange expression on his face. He murmured, Indeed, heroes come from the young. When I was his age, I was still studying. How could I understand these matters of state affairs? I only know a little. Li Yi said modestly. The old man waved his hand and said, If you only knew a little, Qin Wen would not have given you such an evaluation. He looked at Li Yi again and asked, "Recently, the imperial astronomer observed the celestial phenomenon of Mars guarding the heart." Li Yi did not wait for him to finish and interrupted. "I'm afraid that Grand Tutor has asked the wrong person about this question. This blackmailer really had bad intentions." He wanted him to say something like, "Mars guarding the heart," in front of the old emperor. Ordinary people knew what Mars guarding the heart meant. As a great scholar, how could he not know? The old man frowned and looked at him. He asked, "What do you mean?" "You mean, who should I ask about this?" Mingzi glanced at Li Yi vaguely, indicating that he should not talk nonsense. The old emperor's expression was indifferent. It seemed that he was not interested in this matter. Ever since the officials of the imperial astronomer planned to treat his asthma with elixirs, he did not trust them much. "Of course, you should ask the president of the Academy of Sciences, Crown Prince Li Xian." Jing Emperor finally looked at him. The blackmailer looked puzzled. Only Mingzi seemed to think of something and her face showed a look of understanding. Li Yi explained, "Recently, the Academy of Sciences has developed something that allows people to observe the stars in the sky more clearly. As a matter of fact, I saw Mars a few days ago. I believe that Crown Prince Li Xian will be able to answer your doubts about Mars guarding the heart." A long time ago, after the glass was produced, Li Yi had the idea of making a telescope. Of course, it was time-consuming and laborious to polish the lens by hand. It also required a certain skill. The simplest and most convenient way was to ask the Academy of Sciences to do it. There was never a shortage of skilled craftsmen and freaks who were crazy about science. Of course, he could not let him do it for free. In return, Li Yi told him the method of making an astronomical telescope. Although the current manufacturing level was far from the level of scientific research, it was not a problem to look at the craters on the moon and observe a few stars that were relatively close. With a crude astronomical telescope, Li Xian's interest temporarily shifted to looking at the stars. It was fine to look at it alone, but he also brought the Crown Prince's wife and Shu to look at it together. Especially after telling them some basic astronomical knowledge, he had already asked the Crown Prince's wife to draw a sketch of the solar system. The next step was to make a model and plan to make a more sophisticated instrument to find those stars one by one. Li Yi was not worried that he would be tied to a pillar and burned like the sages in the other world. This kind of thing only happened in the West. In ancient times, there was no debate between the heliocentric theory and the geocentric theory in China. There was no debate here either. There were only different theories. Everyone expressed their own opinions and did not agree with each other. If they argued too much, they would just fight and listen to the winner. Of course, there were other reasons for this. Western religions needed these theories to prove that God was in heaven. Overthrowing theories was equivalent to overthrowing God. The god of the Jing kingdom was lying on the bed in front of Li Yi. Overthrowing the theory of Mars guarding the heart, the old emperor must be very happy. If he smiled, he might live for a few more seconds. As for whether Li Xian's theory would cause some people's beliefs to collapse and their worldview to be reshaped, this was not something he considered. But there was one thing he was sure of. If anyone dared to tell him in front of him that Mars guarding the heart meant that Mars was close to the heart, it meant that the emperor who doted on him was dying, and he might beat him to death. Li Yi looked at Grand Tutor Chu again. He wondered how many punches he could take from the Crown Prince. Chapter 855. Can the Academy of Sciences really see Mars clearly? Mingzi couldn't help but turn her head and ask as the two walked out of the hall. It was impossible for it to be clear. The so-called clear only meant that one could vaguely see a spherical object. Li Yi shook his head and said, "It's not as clear as seeing the moon, but it's definitely much clearer than the imperial astronomers. It's enough to prove that the so-called Mars guarding the heart is only a joke." The distance between Mars and Shinsu had long exceeded the imagination of the current people. The saying that the star of misfortune was close to the emperor was simply untenable. You don't have to worry about anything happening to His Majesty. Li Yi shook his head and looked at her. I'm worried that someone will take advantage of Mars guarding the heart to harm you. Mingzu didn't think much of it. What does Mars guarding the heart have to do with me? Li Yi shook his head and murmured, I'm just afraid that some people will go crazy. Chui family. Chui Qingming looked at Chui family head Chui Qingze and asked with a frown, Big brother, how confident are you in this matter? Chui Qingze sighed and said, if the Chu family is willing to stand out and support us, then we have an 80 to 90% chance of success. But Grand Tutor Chu has been playing dumb with us and refusing to help. A 50% chance is already very good. I still think it's a bit far-fetched. Chui Qingming shook his head and said, those ignorant people may believe it, but those in the court won't be so easy to incite. Chui Qingze's eyes flashed as he murmured, what we want is to incite those ignorant people. Once it's established, it'll be difficult to reverse it, and those officials can only go along with it. Before the Lantern Festival, the officials attending the Grand Court Conference usually won't leave the capital. Once it becomes public opinion, even His Majesty can't remain silent. I don't believe that no matter how powerful the eldest princess is, she can shut the mouths of the world and control what they say. She really can. Li Yi hid behind the rockery and picked up a cylindrical object. He put it in front of his eyes and showed off to Rui, look, it's at least 30 feet from here to Rui's room. With this, you can see what she's doing in the room. She's folding her dudu, pink and sky blue. Last time I told her that sky blue suits her, but she didn't listen. Rui took the monoculars she got from Li Xian and said in amazement, really, these two small pieces of glass are so magical when they are inlaid. Amazing, isn't it? Li Yi said proudly, there's something even more amazing. In a few days, I'll borrow the bigger one from the Academy of Sciences. Let's watch the stars together at night, it is indeed magical. Rui put down the binoculars and said, it's just that my husband is mistaken. The one in the Rui room is Xiao Huan, Xiao Huan. Li Yi picked up the binoculars in surprise and looked again. He asked, what about Rui? Here. Suddenly, an extremely clear face appeared in front of him. Li Yi was startled and dropped the binoculars in his hand. In a flash, the binoculars appeared in Mississippi Lu's hands. She imitated Li Yi's look and a surprised expression appeared on her face. With a light leap, she stood on top of the rockery and looked into the distance with a pair of binoculars. After another leap, Mississippi Lu was gone. The only telescope he got from Li Xian was also gone. The binoculars that had been taken away by the Lu family's second young miss couldn't be returned. Li Xian had made pretty good quality binoculars, but there were only 2 or 3 of them. One had been taken by the military for research. This was a must-have item for war. Tie a person to a kite and use the binoculars to look through. Any ambush was all nonsense. The military had even trained a group of air forces. Although the number was small and the process might be relatively tragic, it was said that in the last war with the Zhao kingdom, a small number of military elites flew in the sky and dropped bombs. It was indeed a dazzling scene. So mysterious. What is this? Xing Zumo asked in surprise, holding a new telescope in her hand. Li Yi also held one in his hand. Although the quality wasn't as good as the one Mississippi Lu took away, the effect wasn't much worse. He pointed it at a mountain in the distance and said, like this, slowly turn the telescope until the field of vision becomes clear. Then, you can clearly see the things on the mountain in the distance. Yes, just like this. Look, you can even see the people on the mountainside clearly. Look at the plum forest, there are 2 people there. Move it closer and see clearly. It's a man and a woman. At this time of year, they are going up the mountain to enjoy the plum blossoms. Huh, what are they doing? Why are they suddenly hugging each other? Hey, why is that woman taking off her clothes? Hey! Don't snatch her. Li Yi looked at the Luo Shui goddess, who was looking at him with a face full of shame and anger, and said, "Give me back the telescope. The plum blossoms on the mountainside are really beautiful, shameless." The Luo Shui goddess glanced at him and left angrily. Wan Ruoqing came out with a plate of freshly made pastries. She looked back and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with drunken Mo?" Li Yi waved his hand and said, "I wanted to go up the mountain to enjoy the plum blossoms, but she didn't want to go." "It's okay." Wan Ruoqing looked at him and seemed to have thought of something. She said, "By the way, there's one more thing I think I should tell you." "What is it?" Li Yi looked at her and asked in confusion. "It's related to Her Royal Highness." Wan Ruoqing thought for a moment and said, "There have been some sounds in the brothel these days. Hey, have you heard of Antares guarding the heart?" In a brothel somewhere in the capital, several onlookers were chatting while listening to the play. Suddenly, one of them said mysteriously. One of them immediately nodded and said, "Of course I've heard of it. It's said that every time there's a celestial phenomenon of Antares guarding the heart, it means that the emperor is in trouble. This is an incredible event. The current emperor is ill, and there's a celestial phenomenon these days. Doesn't it mean that?" Halfway through his sentence, he abruptly stopped. However, from the side, someone came over and asked in confusion, "What exactly is going on with what you're talking about?" "It's said that this is a jinx attacking His Majesty." Someone lowered his voice and said, "Antares is too strong. His Majesty has always been in poor health, so it's easy for him to be attacked by Antares. It's said that this Antares is the current Princess Royal." "Shiv, how dare you talk about this kind of thing? I didn't say it." "That's what people are saying. You mean that the Princess Royal is too strong and is at odds with His Majesty, so, I didn't say it. It's said that after the princess took over the government, there was a trend of Antares. This woman getting involved in politics, maybe it's true." "What a blind fool." The voices of the crowd gradually quieted down. A middle-aged man sitting in the corner of the brothel murmured. He stood up, shook his head, and said, "Let's go." A man behind him said in confusion, "The play isn't over yet. Don't you want to watch?" The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "We've seen all the play here. Let's go somewhere else." "Where else?" "Today, I'll take you to the wonderful sound pavilion to listen to music." The big man was stunned, and then he suddenly smiled and said, "The wonderful sound pavilion. I heard that the girls there are." The middle-aged man suddenly felt a blow on his head. He withdrew his hand and scolded, "You useless thing. This is a place to listen to music. What do you want to do?" I don't want to. The big man repeatedly shook his head. "I'm a decent person. I don't do that kind of thing." The middle-aged man was stunned and asked, "Don't want to what?" "I've already warned the people in the brothel not to spread this matter. But we can't control those customers." Wan Ruoqing looked at him and asked with some worry, "Will it be very troublesome?" "Bane." Li Yi picked up a piece of pastry and put it in his mouth. After shaking his head, he looked at Wan Ruoqing and asked, "When did it start?" Wan Ruoqing looked at him and said, "About 2 or 3 days ago. At first, there were only a few people talking about it. Later, when the number of people increased, we realized that there was probably someone behind it." Li Yi picked up another piece of pastry and shook his head. He said, "It's the new year, why bother?" You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.